G'day and welcome and kia ora and hi and hello and g'day to everybody. This is the virtual. This is EdTechTeam Live running the virtual. It's our second ever virtual summit. So we'll be starting the event here in Australia. I'm currently in Brisbane. My name, in case we haven't met, is Chris Betcher. I'm the Director of Learning for EdTechTeam Australia and New Zealand. You can Twitter me at BetcherBoy. And we'll be running this broadcast here from, I'm currently in Brisbane, for the next 4 hours, and then we'll be handing over to the UK, and they'll be broadcasting for the next 4 hours, and then that will be handed over slightly after that over to the US. So buckle in. We've got a whole bunch of PD coming your way from some really talented presenters. Let me tell you a bit about it. So like I said, this is the virtual. This is the Australia-New Zealand section, and we've got some great presenters coming to you from Australia and New Zealand. Let me tell you a bit about EdTechTeam, just in case you don't know. EdTechTeam is a team of educators and ex-educators, or people who have been in classrooms and people who still are in classrooms. And our goal there is we improve the world's education systems using the best learning principles and technologies available. I should probably put this on the screen. There you go. Now you can all see that. So that's what we do. I like to describe it this way. I say, you know, there are lots of technology companies like Google and others who build some amazing technology tools, but they don't really tell you how to use it. They just make it. And that's where we fit in. We go into classrooms and we work with schools here in Australia and New Zealand and all around the world to help teachers understand how to make the most of all these amazing technologies in their classroom. Some of the things we do these cool events called summits. They're high-intensity, 2-day conference-style events. They, in the past, have been quite focused on Google for Education, although we are branching out into all sorts of other technologies now. There's still quite a good Google focus, but lots of other things as well. So we do these summit programs. We also do custom PD, where we will work with schools to go in and help you design custom professional learning experiences specifically for your needs. So basically you tell us what you need and we will develop a program of learning to support that. And it's a really effective way to get professional learning in your classroom or in your staff, because you get exactly what you're after. We also run an online division, so there's lots of online courses. We'll talk more about that later. We have a whole bunch of really interesting courseware that you can do online. It's really well priced, so you know, teachers can go in there and just do it at their own pace. And we also have some cohort-based learning as well, which again I'll talk to you about shortly. And just want to flag this week, this is new. You know, we've been running these summit events around Australia and New Zealand and the world for quite a while now. And some of the things we do in those summits we know are really popular with teachers. And what we've done is we've got these new one-day workshops and we've designed them around the most popular parts of the summit. So each of these workshops is produced by an experienced and expert educator in that particular field. And we'll be running these all over Australia and New Zealand in the coming year, in 2019. So keep your eye out for those. You can follow along for this broadcast at hashtag EdTechTeam on Twitter. And if you also want to tag it with the virtual summit as well, that would be great, and we'll get a conversation happening on the Twitters. And EdTechTeam has always been on Twitter with our @EdTechTeam account. I just want to let you know that we have recently sort of started an EdTechTeam Australia New Zealand account, so you might want to also follow us there on EdTechTeam ANZ to get all the action of what's happening down here in the Antipodes. We are going to give away some prizes as we go through the next 4 hours as well. Actually, the next 24 hours, we'll be giving away lots of prizes. If you head over there to edtech.team /the virtual prize, you'll find a Google form on the end there. Just pop in your name and details, and we will draw some prizes at the end and give away some stuff. We've got books and free tickets to summits and all sorts of things to give away. So stay tuned for that. The other thing, as you watch today, hopefully you'll get tons of great ideas about what you might do in your classroom. And so we've set up a Flipgrid. The theme for our summit program next year is, what will you create? And we want it to be all about creation, actually making stuff. We kind of always have had that focus, but we're really explicitly looking at next year this idea of helping you create and helping you help your students create. So if you go to flipgrid.com/create2019, you'll find a Flipgrid there, and we'd love to hear some of the ideas that you've got for how you might implement some of the things you're learning today back in your classroom. All right. It is my great pleasure to introduce, for a very mini keynote, Kimberly Hall. Kimberly is the Regional Director of Australia New Zealand for EdTechTeam. Kimberly was an English teacher and then worked with the Catholic Education Office in Melbourne for Victoria. Has tons of experience. Kimberly was the first Google certified trainer in Australia. What she doesn't know about Google stuff is just not worth even worrying about. So I'm going to hand over to Kimberly Hall. Over to you.
Thanks, Chris. I always enjoy listening to other people introduce you and the number of things that they get wrong. And I'm presenting to everyone still. Okay, can you see me on my screen right now?
I can see you.
Okay, hold on, Okay. Yeah, so I was not the first certified trainer in the country. I was the first female to be both a certified trainer and an innovator. But I don't know. Do you know who the first certified trainer in Australia would have been, Betcha?
I don't know, but I never let the facts get in the way of a good story.
Oh, okay. All right, good. I won't point out all the other inaccuracies as well then. I also wanted to say, though, on your, in relation to the Flipgrid, I believe Nick Briley is doing something on Flipgrid within the next hour. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So if you are interested in more info about that, and I don't really know what Nick's going to talk about in his 20 minutes, but I'm sure that he will inspire you if you sort of listen to Chris talk about using the Flipgrid and aren't sure where to start. But I'm going to screen share successfully, hopefully. And okay, can you now see my presentation?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So I'm just going to talk to you very briefly. I will not take up a lot of time at all this morning, which is always a challenge as a teacher to remember to not take up too much time. A little bit about equity for in education. And I guess I wanted to start with talking about this concept, about actually introducing something that is reasonably a recent feature that's been added into Google Slides. So you can see I'm presenting my Google slideshow now. And can you see when I hover my mouse, does that come up in the shared screen, Chris? You can see the menu options or not? No,
I don't think so.
Okay, so when I'm presenting, when you're in presenter mode in slides,
I can now. Yeah.
You can, yeah. If you go to the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see you have some options down here. There's some really cool things in here like Q&A where you can get some audience participation. You can add notes. There's a pointer, like a digital laser pointer, I guess. But a really recent feature is actually this ability to do live closed captions. And I have never done this before, so I thought, sure, why not try it on a Hangout with who knows how many people watching. But basically, when I turn this on, it's actually going to start to close caption everything that I am sharing, which is a pretty cool feature. And it is a feature that totally would change the entire experience of listening to me talk, either in this presentation or in the classroom for many learners. So I just wanted to demonstrate it today and see how it goes. I have to consciously try not to just stare at it and see if it's getting it right the whole time, because that's what my instinct is telling me to do. So I'll try really hard not to do that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about equity for learners. And I wanted to start by being completely honest and talk when I was in the classroom. I was one of those people that was very, very big on equality. And I used to talk about wanting to make sure that all of my students had equal access and equal opportunities. And I even had things like, okay, I taught senior English, and during my Year 12's SWAT back, so their study time before their exams, which has just been happening over here in this part of the world, I would allocate each student X number of hours of my time to spend one-on-one with me, because I only had a certain number of hours in the day, and I knew that that was the way to actually make sure that all of my kids got an opportunity. And I remember my first time I ever read about equity and not really understanding it, because for me, it sort of, I guess, challenged this concept that I'd been working on, that I was creating equality, and I thought that was great. I wanted all of my kids to have this equal access and equal opportunity. And so I recently had my second child only a couple of months ago, and it's actually interesting that this has been the most eye-opening thing for me in terms of the difference between equality and equity, is actually introducing a new baby into a house when there is already a toddler. So as most of you would know, if you have a child who is newborn and a 2-year-old, they have very, very different needs. And when I was thinking about becoming a mother for a second time, I was really worried about how I was going to make sure that my first child still felt loved and got all the attention and all the things that she needed from me as her mother, while also caring for this new baby. And I had these ideas in my mind about, okay, well, if I spend X amount of time with my new son, then I better do this with my daughter. And I realized very, very quickly that that model wasn't going to work, because I was once again going down the equality model rather than the equity model. And obviously what my newborn son needed from me as his mother was really different to what my 2-year-old daughter needed. And for me, that was a really great learning curve in terms of realizing that I wasn't doing anybody a disservice. I was actually making sure that I gave everybody who I was caring for what they needed, which was different for everybody. And that's the concept of equity. I heard a great story that I want to relay to you from our friend and colleague, Dorothy Burt. Dorothy is from Auckland, New Zealand, and she is an amazing educator. If you don't know Dorothy, you should stop what you're doing right now and look her up and find out more info about her, because she has done some really amazing things in terms of this space in New Zealand. But Dorothy shared this story last year about this concept of kids starting school, and she used the analogy of an escalator. So for all of us in this part of the world, we know that if we're going to go up the escalator, we would go to the left, and if we're going to come down the escalator, the escalator on the right is actually coming down. If you're in North America, that's probably already blowing your mind, but that's how we do it. So Dorothy was talking about this concept of when kids start school. And this is where the equity concept is so super important. So kids that start school who have had parents who are employed, who may have graduated high school or even from university, who were talked to a lot as children, who potentially had books in the home or access to public library books and were read to a lot. When they start school, they hop on the left side of the escalator and they start going up. And the things that they have and the supports that they have, each step, you know, is a caregiver, it's a teacher, it's an aid worker, it's a support staff within a school, and they are able to continue to move forward in their learning really quickly and easily because they have all these things in place. And the students that are not as lucky as that, and who, you know, parents potentially didn't finish school and may not have a job and may not have access to things like literacy tools and being read to when they were young and things like that. When they start school, it's a little bit like they've hopped onto that right escalator over there, and they're actually having to try and get up the stairs as the stairs are coming down towards them. And so even though they have the same access to the same supports, to the same teachers and the same educators generally in the school, they actually are constantly battling, and it's a much bigger challenge for them. And so when we look at this and we look at the way that we're providing opportunities for our kids and the people in our care, we have to think about what do they need to all be actually given an equitable experience and the same opportunities. Many of you have probably seen this graphic before, but this is the perfect example of talking about the difference between equality and equity. And so on the left there, we have a situation where all three of these people trying to watch the soccer game, I guess it is, have been given equal access to that. But as you can see, obviously, there's only really one that benefits, and that person was, you know, they're okay anyway. And the image on the right is a really fantastic image of this concept of equity, where they're actually all given exactly what they need to be able to participate in this particular activity, which is watching the football. And there's actually a third one. If you look up this graphic online, there are literally hundreds of versions of this same sort of thing. Just Google equality versus equity. And there is a third graphic that you'll often see. Well, it's a fourth one as well, but the third one that I really like, and I like to think of as the next step beyond what we're going to talk about today, is when that fence totally disappears. So not only are we giving the kids exactly what they need in order to have a great experience, but we actually are looking at how do we remove the barriers that exist. So if we remove the fence, then the barrier wouldn't be there for them. And so then obviously we wouldn't have to put those other support networks in place. So I want to tell a story that's based off a TED Talk, and if you haven't seen this, I have it in this presentation, and I think, Chris, we're sharing slides somewhere. I will share them at the end anyway. And this is a TED Talk called The Myth of Average. And once again, this is another one that you should totally be Googling right now and adding it to your watch later playlist in YouTube. And this talks about in 1952, the Air Force had a problem. And their problem was that they had the best technology they'd ever had access to. Their planes were developed by the best engineers with the best concepts, the best ideas of everything, but they're actually getting the worst results that they'd ever had in history. And they were a little bit baffled to why this was happening. And they went through this whole process of trying to identify the root of the cause of the issue. And they eventually realized that it wasn't the individual pilot, it wasn't the planes as such, it wasn't the manufacturers. They tried to blame everybody. It was the fact that the cockpits had been designed for what they perceived to be the average pilot. And as we know, the concept of what someone looking like an average pilot is going to be really different. These four ladies here are all fighter jet pilots, but they all are physically very, very different. And so you can imagine if you are flying in a fighter jet, I don't know if any of you have ever been lucky enough to, I'm not sure if it's actually lucky, I'd be terrified. But if you were ever in a fighter jet pilot position that, you're flying at such phenomenal speeds that one tiny little change could totally change the experience, for the better or the worse. So they did this whole review of all of the pilots that they currently had, and they found, I can't remember the number, it was thousands of pilots that they got all of their statistics of, their height, their weight, their length of their arms, the length of their legs, et cetera, et cetera. And they found that these cockpits that were being designed for the average pilot, that not a single one of their pilots actually fit 100% into the average category, because everybody is so unique and so different. So what it basically meant was that they were designing something for the average, which meant that they were actually designing in a way that didn't benefit anybody at all. And so they went back and they looked at the cockpits. And they went back to the manufacturers of the planes, and the manufacturers were reticent to do anything about it because everything was so expensive to change. But they really insisted that they needed to look at how they could change some things to ensure that they were able to accommodate more than just the average pilot shape, height, etc. And one of the things that they introduced was something taken from the humble car, which was an adjustable seat. And it's something as simple as this, a technology that has existed, that was being used in other modes of transportation at this time that hadn't been appropriated into the pilot's cockpit, totally changed the whole space for these pilots, because suddenly they were able to open up the opportunity for people to be pilots who would never have been able to previously, and they attracted the most diverse workforce that they had ever had. This is the TED Talk, if you're interested in looking at it. And Ted Rose finishes his little description of this, and he actually is he works in education, and he talks about the fact that not many of us have probably ever been in a fighter jet cockpit, but we've all been in a classroom, and we have to think about how when we design for the average, are we designing for equality, or are we designing for equity? Because if we change one thing, we just might change everything. So I was thinking about this, and obviously I've only got a few minutes, so I wanted to just share a couple of the things that I have seen and that have totally changed the opportunities for some of the young people that I have been lucky enough to work with. The first one that I wanted to flag was around speech technology, so text-to-speech and speech-to-text. And I just got two examples on the screen. There's many, many more, but these are two of my all-time favorites in terms of creating equity for all learners. The ability to have text read to you and also to transcribe text through your voice is totally something which creates incredible equity in your classroom. There are so many kids that have, and adults as well, who have backgrounds where they might have lower literacy levels, dyslexia, a whole series, and they might have auditory issues, and any of those difficulties that they're experiencing can be somewhat assisted through the ability of voice technology. Linking back to my children, my now 2-year-old, she started to talk really early. It's shocking considering both of her parents talk for a living that she learnt to talk so early. And literally, scarily enough, within a few months of her having only a few words and a few phrases, she was starting to try to say, "Hey, Google," because we have Google Home in our house and we are constantly asking it to do things. And she worked out that if she kept saying, "Hey, Google," that she could probably have the Wiggles Pay on repeat 24/7. And it was really interesting for me because I was reflecting on that and thinking, if we didn't have voice-activated technology, there is absolutely no way that she would have had any ability to connect and get answers that she was looking for. And she's 2, but this is just as applicable to so many other students that are a lot older than her, and adults as well. And we may not know how to necessarily spell it, or we don't know the right way of phrasing it, but we can ask, and we can ask those series of questions. The other technology that I've got on the screen there is from TextHelp, who are really good friends of ours. And if you haven't seen the Read and Write extension, it is hands down my favorite piece of technology that exists, aside from the whole Google suite, which is a pretty big piece of technology, I guess, online in terms of creating equity. And their text-to-speech functions and their ability to record voice and things like that is phenomenal. And it is a game changer for students all around the globe. I've seen some really fantastic stories from that. The other technology that I just wanted to flag that I have seen firsthand make a huge difference is the touch screen. And this is once again my 2-year-old. And this is something that literally happened in the last week. And I wasn't sure whether I should be proud or horrified. But she's an early learning student at the moment. And the other day she went and got my Chromebook. And she opened up my Chromebook, and she had watched me obviously do this before, and she clicked on the guest user sign in, so she didn't actually have to sign in. And then we had the little YouTube icon docked down the bottom of the Chromebook, so she touched the YouTube icon and then just kept touching videos on the screen until she got to the videos that she wanted to watch. This is technology that is because of the touchscreen that she's able to do that. She doesn't have the language skills by any stretch of the imagination to have been able to type in. She doesn't understand a single letter on the keyboard yet, but she's actually able. She's empowered to learn and to, well, in this case, binge watch YouTube because of this technology. And this is about, creating opportunities for kids to get what it is that they need at the point in time when they need it. And on that note, I know that it's very conscious of time, so I am going to stop speaking right now. And I just want you to have a think about, as you tune into the virtual today, all of the speakers are going to share different ideas from different technologies and different things that they've seen have impact in their different environments. And you can't take them all away, and you can't use them all straight away because, we don't have that many hours in the day. But have a think about how you can find one technology or one tool that might create an opportunity for a student in your care and create equity and give them an opportunity to try something different, to learn in a different way. Even if it's something as simple as trying out the closed captions, which I've been using while presenting these slides today. So let me just get out of this and jump over here. I'll stop sharing. So Chris, you can start doing that again.
Thank you. Wow, that was great. I'm super impressed at that closed captioning thing. I had not seen that working before. That's amazing.
How accurate was it?
It was pretty accurate. I'd say more than 90% accurate. And interestingly, like you said a few times in sentences, and it completely cut out all the ums and ahs. And it was at one point I noticed you sort of giggled a little bit, and it actually went ha ha, and I actually put the words ha ha in there.
That's brilliant.
It was hilarious. But
I actually had to physically turn away from it so I didn't just stare at it the whole time. Otherwise, I would have been reading it and I wouldn't have paid any attention to what I was talking about. So,
nice. Well, thank you so much for that. I'd say, has anyone got any questions? But I guess we'll throw it over to the stream later. We'll check. I'm finding it very hard to do everything all at once here. So if you guys want to check the Twitter stream and tell me if there's anything interesting in there, that'd be super helpful. We might just pass over back to this computer, which is this one. So hopefully you can see my slides there. So we've divided this our section up here into 3 different components. Well, the first one we've called Creating with Chromebooks, and the second part we're going to start there at 5:40 Australian Eastern is called Creating World Problem Solvers, and then our final closing part here, which is 6:50 Eastern, is Creating Teacher Leaders. So we're going to kick into now the session called Creating with Chromebooks, and I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Anthony Speranza, also from Melbourne. And Anthony has a really interesting title on this one called Beyond the Banana Bongo.
G'day, Chris. How you going?
Good, mate. Good. Where you are in Melbourne today?
I am in Melbourne today. Yeah, it's great to be here, and great to be kicking off the Creating with Chromebooks stream.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you have a lot of experience with Chromebooks. Your school uses them pretty extensively.
Yeah, we do. And obviously, you know, around the world, Chromebooks are picking up in popularity, which is great to see as well. So,
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm going to hand it over to you, Anthony, and you're starting a couple of minutes early, so you've got time on your side. So, take it away.
Awesome. Can you just let me know? I'll put my screen into present mode. Can you see that?
Yeah. Let me just turn this one off, and I'll turn your one on. There you go. So you should now see your screen.
Great.
Okay.
So thanks, Chris. As you indicated, this session is going to be called Beyond the Banana Bongo, Creating Awesome Projects with Scratch and Makey Makey. As Chris said, I'm a ICT and learning and teaching leader from Melbourne. So I'm working in a primary school from foundation to year 6, assisting our students and teachers to leverage technology every day. We have a Chromebook program in place, so we use G Suite. And of course, many Australian schools and many schools abroad are having to turn their attention to teaching digital technologies and computer science. And part of this presentation will be discussing Scratch as a programming language, which is very popular, but also a Makey Makey device, which can be used with Chromebooks to create awesome projects. These slides can be accessed from this link here, so goo.gl/WT9, capital R, lowercase g, and capital K. But I know they'll probably be shared at the end as well. So if you're not familiar, Makey Makey is a input device that you can plug into any laptop with a USB port. And what the Makey Makey does is you can create switches and circuits to interact with your laptop device to send it keystrokes. So let me just break this down a little bit and how this sort of works. You have a board and there's a USB cord connected into your device. And there is a ground or an earth circuit. When you're connected to that and then you touch another part of the Makey Makey inputs, you can create a complete circuit and then send a keystroke into the keyboard. So one of the common ways that Makey Makey introduced this is the idea of creating a banana key. As you can see here, if you complete the grounded circuit, touch the banana key, you will send a keystroke to the computer. The computer is thinking you have just pressed a key. So one of the popular applications is this banana bongo or banana piano. In fact, in the Makey Makey logo is typified by this banana looking key here. And so one of the common things that you'll see in YouTube videos is this sort of like banana or fruit keyboard and bongos. And, you know, these are really cool for about, 60 seconds maybe. I like to think about going beyond these things. On the Makey Makey page, they have a few apps. So when you connect your Makey Makey up to your computer device, you can then play these particular apps through your browser. And a lot of these are musical instruments. So you have your bongos and you have your pianos. And so you could interact with your fruit that you have set up with your Makey Makey and create all sorts of different sound effects and music. There's a couple of more advanced sound effects and synth generators. But one of the things they suggest you have a look at is actually Scratch, because if you have Scratch running on your computer and you set up Scratch to respond when certain keystrokes are triggered, then you can create sound and visual effects on your computing device. So as we mentioned in the beginning, Chromebooks are picking up in popularity, which is great. Now Chromebooks have a USB port, and they also run Scratch 2.0, and soon they'll be running Scratch 3.0 next year as well. So when you couple the fact that if you've got devices like this in the hands of kids where everybody has a USB input device and everyone can run Scratch, and you couple that with a very simple electronic circuit, and these retail for about 60 Australian dollars, and you can find them cheaper elsewhere online. I really think this combination is just incredibly awesome. Some of the things that you can do in here, and whilst banana bongos look pretty awesome, you can do even greater things with these things. I want to take this moment to talk about something that Seymour Papert said quite a few decades ago. I offered an analogy for effective technology and how suitable that is for learners. And one of the things he said was that technology has to have low floors, meaning that it has to be easy for novices to get started. On the other hand, you want it to be scalable enough so that there are high ceilings, so that you can work on increasingly sophisticated projects over time. And I think that's one of the things that Scratch does really, really well. Scratch is, as a visual block-based programming language, it's really easy for young learners to get a hold of. But some of the things that you can do in Scratch are incredibly sophisticated and complex. So I think that's one of the reasons why Scratch and Makey Makey together does offer that low floor and high ceiling application. And I've certainly been using this in my school from years 3 upwards, because around about year 2, year 3 seems to be the appropriate age level to introduce students to Scratch 2.0. But one of the things that Mitch Resnick offered recently as an add-on to this analogy was another dimension called wide walls, and that also the technology should offer multiple pathways and applications of projects and processes. And I think this is what the Makey Makey offers, because it allows you to interact with real-world objects. And so you're able to create a program in Scratch and interact with that through the physical world and the Makey Makey. And so part of this presentation will be definitely showing some of the ways that we've applied these concepts with our learners, and some of the things that we've been able to achieve in the last 18 months. So first of all, certainly the idea of banana bongos and sound machines is very appealing to learners. And so I'll talk a little bit about some of the conductive material you can use with Makey Makey toward the end. But you can see here we've just got some plastic cups wrapped in foil. And then these are connected up to the Makey Makey. And then there's also a barbecue foil tray. And so these sorts of materials are quite useful for creating circuits, because it means that you could place one hand on this tray and the other hand on these foil cups. And in effect, you'd be playing like a digital instrument, if you like. And so that's usually the first thing that we get them to do, is just connect that all up and play some simple sounds. But in terms of taking that further, we like to experiment with other types of materials and switches. So aluminium foil that you can get on a roll and roll it out and cut it out to size can be really useful to create, I guess, like a bit of a digital synthesizer, inspired by the digital synthesizer. But then also in Scratch, using multiple notes, multiple octaves, and even an opportunity to sort of talk about harmony and melody and arpeggios. And in Scratch, there are a wide range of instruments. There are many notes and very visual effects that you could do. So in Scratch, you would set up your program to say something like, when up key is pressed, set instrument 18, which might be an electronic piano, and play that note. And then similarly, I could set something for down arrow and right arrow and left arrow. And so in Makey Makey, you can map all of these keys. You can map up, down, left, right, and space. And there's a couple of extra keys on the back as well. So if you set up Scratch to respond when these events are created, this is how you interact with the Makey Makey and your Scratch program. One of the other things that we've done in 3.4 as well is creating these paper circuits. So this is a 2B pencil. It's one of the thicker varieties, which I find for young kids, if you're able to get your hands on the thicker triangle ones, it just makes it a little bit easier for them drawing their circuits, because you do have to press quite hard on the paper. Now, contained inside this grey lead is lead, of course, and sometimes a small amount of graphite, and these are conductive. And so what happens is you can lay conductive tracks on a page and create circuits. So you could examine some real circuits, have a look at how they work, and then get students to design, using grey lead pencil, their own circuits and connect these up via alligator clips into the Makey Makey. There is a playlist here which I've used If you have a look at, do a Google search for something like, makey paper circuits or makey sound machines, you'll find lots of really, really interesting examples that other people have created. And one of the things that I saw was this idea of an animated character. I saw this YouTube video, someone had drawn a robot and then connected up with a paper circuit. And then so when they touched the robot's head, it made a sound. When it touched the robot's left arm, it made a sound. And so we used that as inspiration to create animated characters in 3-4. We asked the students to select through the Scratch library some of the characters and sprites that they might want to use, and then think about how they would interact with that through a paper circuit. So using the grey lead pencil again, and drawing their character on the page and having a separate circuit for the arms, and then a separate circuit for the head and separate circuit for the body, and creating programs in Scratch that respond in a certain way when some of those parts of the character is pressed. You can take that a step further by going into Scratch and I guess using the vector image inside there to layer different visual effects so that you could match some costume changes when up or down or left arrow keys are pressed. Here are some other really cute examples of paper circuits that have been made. This is obviously Scratch, the cat, being turned into a paper circuit, and of course can't go Australia without a lovely unicorn as well. So this is something they certainly enjoyed after examining the initial paper circuit lesson and then translating that into an animated character to bring that into life. That's what it looks like in 3-4, but in Year 5-6, this is something we've done recently where we've created interactive art pieces. This has been really cool. This sort of alignment between visual art and STEM meets digital technologies. And so our point here was to see if we could enhance a visual art medium through audio and visual effects through a Chromebook to evoke certain feelings and thoughts by the viewer. And so what we did was we painted our visual art pieces and then we stuck through these split pins. And this is the front side and this is the reverse side. When you bring the pin up through the art piece, you can then fold it down. Now these pins are made out of brass or alloy, and so these are quite conductive. And so what we got our students to do was to paint their piece, stick it onto a piece of scrap cardboard, put the pins in as touch points, and then wire up a circuit. This material here is called copper tape. Now, you could have achieved this probably with grey lead and foil, but certainly copper tape is an adhesive product that you can get on a roll, and you can apply this to create some more firm, rigid circuitry, and then connect these up to makey as well. These art pieces were inspired by the 4 elements of fire, earth, air, and water. And so we asked students to consider how look at some visual imagery to, I guess, represent some of these elements, and then having a think about what does those elements look like, sound like, feel like? How would you represent them? What sort of colors and textures would you use? And then turning the attention to thinking about, well, when a user interacts with my art piece, how do I want them to feel? And so if I want them to feel surprised, or if I want them to feel challenged, what sort of sound effects would I play through the Chromebook? What sort of visual effects would I play through the Chromebook when a person comes and interacts with my art piece? We had a gallery exhibition, so we produced 130 pieces of interactive art in years 5-6, and we all had a day each to put on an expo. We invited the whole school community to come in and interact with some of these art pieces. And the other thing we did was ask the students to create an author statement to justify the sorts of decisions that they'd made and some of the sound effects that they'd used in Scratch. This is a piece inspired by water. And the students were telling me about that when it rains, that it could be a symbolism that it's actually the environment crying tears of suffering. And that's the name of this piece, Tears of Suffering. And when you come and touch some of these interactive points, you hear things like a car starting, or the sound of a sewer, or plastic being scrunched up, or a piece of paper being torn, or the sound of sound of a tree being cut down. And this sort of point was getting the viewer to think about our own impact on the environment, and are we really aware of that? And this is one of my favorite examples as well. created by Harry, and he was inspired by Earth as a sort of provider of life and called this the tree of life. And he's gone in and put these sort of animals in this sort of symbolic way. And when you interact with these, you hear the sort of like rich nature of the animal kingdom, I guess. And so that was really an interesting example as well. So there's a couple other projects that we'll run through here. This is a Buzzwire game. This was inspired by something I used to play when I would visit sort of fetes and carnivals, where you'd get a little wand and you'd have to run that wand through the wire without touching and try and get to the end. So you can replicate this in Makey Makey and Scratch by using Play-Doh. Play-Doh is a great conductive material because it contains water, and some scrap metal pieces for wire. And so from a computational thinking perspective, you can develop a Scratch program so that this would be wired up so that when the wire wand touches this loop, it would create a complete circuit and send a space key to the keyboard. Therefore, in Scratch, you can get Scratch to listen out for that space key. When the space key is pressed, play a buzzing sound and switch backdrop to, say, backdrop 2, which might be yellow. Otherwise, if space bar is not pressed, then don't play anything and switch it to the plain backdrop. And so what happens is when you play in the Buzzwire game, if you touch the wire, you'll get the buzzing sound and you'll get the screen going off as well. But of course, it's about going a little bit beyond this as well and asking students to think about other sound effects that they and visual effects that they might employ. And this is what it looked like at a 3-4 level. In 5-6, they used cardboard, and they also used foil to create extra switches. So you start your wand on this switch, which would also be wired up to the Makey Makey, and that might be an up arrow. And the one on the right might be a down arrow. So you could do things in Scratch like create timers, for example, to see how long it takes you to reach this point to the other point, or a scoring system. Some students created lives, like you start the game with 3 lives, and then every time you touch the wire, you lose life, and then you have a variable that will count those sorts of lives being taken up. This is probably one of my favorite examples here of an electronic bin using Makey Makey. This was one of our environmental science topics. Our guiding question was, how might we change human behaviour to have an impact on our environment? Now, our challenge to our students was to construct a working prototype of a bin that entertains or informs humans to motivate them to use the bin for waste or recycling. And some of the things they created were really interesting, again, using copper tape. In this example here, it's the lid is wired up so that the bin can detect when the bin is open and closed, insinuating that when the bin is open, that somebody's using that bin and placing something into the bin. We invited one of our students to apply for a STEM exhibition, and they created this awesome bin and put this in the 1-2 area. This is probably about 1/2 meter high, and it's just used some old, I think about it like a fridge cardboard box or something like that. And inside here is a cavity, and that's actually a student Chromebook sitting inside that as like electronic display, connected with a USB soundbar and a reset button and a help button. And so every time somebody comes and puts in a piece of compost, a trigger goes off, which activates in Scratch a sound effect of this little cute dragon burping and saying, "Thank you for saving the environment." And every time something is entered into the bin, this little counter goes up. And when it reaches 40, an alert will go off saying it's time to empty the bin, and someone can come along and reset that and set that back to 0. And these boys really, really enjoyed this project. They spent a lot of time and effort on it, and they actually did quite well in that exhibition. So just in wrapping up here, we've been using Makey Makey as an option for some of the Genius Hour projects. These are all hyperlinks, so you could pursue these in your own time. But some of my absolute favorites was when a couple of students created a fencing game out of foil vests and wands. And the other really interesting one was like a basketball shot clock and scorekeeper. They put a switch underneath the basketball ring to count how many times the ball had gone through the basketball net, and then to calculate scores and keep count of those. So they've been quite interesting. And if you're interested in more about Genius Hour, you can read that on either my blog or our school blog as well. So just in wrapping up, banana is a great conductive material, and so are apples and kiwis, and fruits and vegetables can be used as conductive materials. The recommendation I would be making to any schools that have Chromebooks is certainly, if you want to invest in a set of Makey-Makeys, they're extremely affordable and they go really, really a long way, hopefully, that I've demonstrated today. And some of the materials that I recommend you'd have in your kit are things like split pins, wire, paper clips, foil, washers. Play-Doh, again, is a great conductive material, interesting material. Grey lead graphite pencils and copper tape, which you can buy, 30 meters in a small little roll for, about $15, something like that. So it's certainly worth pulling that out for some projects. And certainly having things like masking tape, glue sticks, cardboard boxes, rubber bands, popsicle sticks, straws, and things like that are certainly great for making these sorts of projects too. So just in wrapping up, and Chris will be happy to answer any sort of questions that might come up. One thing that we're asked to do to address in the Australian curriculum digital technologies is to apply these 3 ways of thinking. And I think Makey-Makey and Scratch lend itself really well to this idea of how do I create something in an interactive real-world object for a meaningful purpose. And so you have design thinking, which is all about thinking what is the end user going to interact with and how is that going to have an impact on them. The systems thinking about identifying key components of circuitry and USB cords and alligator clips and USB ports and Scratch as an operating system are really important to understand how all these things work together. And then, of course, your computational thinking is really important because a lot of this is going to depend on how this Scratch program will be designed. So, Chris, happy to answer any questions. Last thing I'll point out is on the back of the Makey-Makey circuit, you also have the option of using a further 6 keys. So you can map 12 keys in total, giving you all sorts of different switches you can use. And there's also on the back a 5-volt out. So what you could do with this is, for example, power an LED or even power a small motor when some of these circuits and connections are made. And so, yeah, look, it's really quite an interesting, nifty piece of hardware that I'd really recommend for schools that have Chromebooks and are wanting to teach some computer science concepts to students. Otherwise, thank you for that. There are the slides, and I've got some further musings on Scratch and Makey-Makey on my blog if you want to see some of those lessons in more detail. I've got even a couple of lesson plans that you can have a look at. So thank you. Any questions?
Every now and then I think I'm doing a really good job as a teacher, and then I meet Anthony Speranza and I just see an amazing body of work of stuff you're getting to do. That's awesome stuff, mate.
Thanks.
Really, really impressive. And that's why we're so glad we get to work with you. Where's the best place to buy the Makey-Makeys?
So if you go through makeymakey.com, if you're in Australia, that's mainly as a US reseller. So yeah. Local resellers for Australia will be places like Little Bird Electronics, edtechs.com, and a couple of places like that. You can even get them on eBay. You can buy the genuine kit, and you can buy sort of like the imitation versions, which work pretty well. The cheapest I've found is through a website called zapals.com, zapals.com, and they're for about $20 each. Yeah. I've found some of the USB cords after a while start to deteriorate, but yeah, look, in terms of providing like a set of 15 or 30, it makes it very, very affordable to do that and just buy a couple of extra USB cords laying around. It's a really great addition to any makerspace.
Yeah, nice. Just stop sharing your screen for a second so we can actually see you.
Yep, just give a sec.
And 2 things come to mind. I just want to point out that I mentioned before that we're launching into another round of summits for 2019, and we've got this create theme going. One of the changes we're making to the summit program for next year is that day 2, where we would normally have had a keynote, we're actually having what's called a maker's kitchen. And so we'll actually be running a whole bunch of this kind of stuff for people to come and sort of go and get hands-on and dirty with a lot of these kinds of cool things that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, and something like, even while we're talking about Chromebooks, Microbit is a great one as well that we've been using because it's you're able to flash the Microbit via USB, and that has a variety of sensors as well. Yeah. So I think anything like that, where it's like Makey-Makey or Microbit, is starting to become really cool for schools because it's really affordable. You can connect it via USB, and that's one of the great things about Chromebooks, of course, as part of the design is that it has a USB port.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do notice, I don't want to take any more of Nick's time, but I did notice that the beta version of Scratch 3, that will be coming out on the 2nd of January next year, actually has built-in connections for Makey and the microbit,
as well.
also Lego and WeDos and all sorts of things actually baked right into Scratch 3. So very exciting. I can see where this is going. Thanks so much for your presentation. That was awesome.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thanks, mate. And I'm going to hand over now to Mr. Nick Briley. And Nick hails from Sydney, and he can tell you a little bit about where he works and what he does. But Nick is going to give us a talk called 3 Ways to Use Flipgrid with Your Students. So, Mr. Briley, over to you, sir.
Thanks very much, Chris. I'm hoping everyone can hear me. You can hear me, can't you, Chris?
Yeah, all good. All good.
Fantastic. All right. Yep, so my talk today is all about Flipgrid. I'm sure a lot of you out there probably heard of Flipgrid. When I do this talk, most of the time people usually have heard of it, but they don't really know what to do with it. You know, they've heard different things, but I guess I'm just here to sort of give you a couple ideas about how you might start to use Flipgrid with your kids. So this is me. That's my little Bitmoji there. My regular job every single day. Oops, just my little sister's just messaging me there in the corner. My regular job is actually I'm a Year 6 teacher over at Sacred Heart Catholic Primary School over in Mossman, which is in Sydney, on the lower North Shore. But in the holidays, I actually go and do some work with EdTechTeam to go and present at different summits and that sort of thing. But my bread and butter is, you know, working with the kids in my class, and I absolutely love that job. It's just fantastic. If you're interested in getting in touch with me at all, you can get in touch with me at my EdTechTeam email there. It's just nick@edtechteam.com, or you can follow me on Twitter. I'm not actually sure how to pronounce that username. It's the name of a song I used to really love and still do love. But that's how you can get in contact with me after this. If you're interested in any of my slides or any presentations or anything like this, I do have some other Flipgrid materials on my resource site, and you can see that there. It's just bit.ly /Nick Briley, all lowercase, no spaces or anything like that.
Hey, Nick, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, Nick,
but,
yeah,
can't see your screen at the moment.
Oh.
We see your smiling face.
See your beautiful face.
Okay. I'm just talking to my screen, but that's okay. Let me see about. Can you see me now? You can still see me, or you can see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen now.
Great. Okay. So now can you see my slide?
Yep. Loading.
Fantastic. Great. So I just talked through all of this sort of stuff. So I'll just leave this here for a second. If you'd like to write down actually how to spell my name. No one really knows how to spell my name when I say it, and no one really knows how to say my name when I spell it. So it's just BRIERLEY, and that's me. But I'll flash this up at the end anyway, just for anyone who needs to get in contact with me afterwards. A really important point I wanted to make before I get started is, you know, why are we creating a space like a Flipgrid for student voice? And I think that's something really important to think about before you use any tool. Yeah, sure, it's really cool and I really like it, and my students really like it, but why am I actually doing it? And the truth is, student voice is so important because learning is not done to your students. It's very much a process where you're learning with them. And if they have no stake in it, then there's not a whole lot of learning that can actually happen. So Flipgrid's a really good resource for that. And I suppose talking about how Flipgrid really works with Chromebooks, why is that such a good winning combination? Why is it a good winning combination to have a device like a Chromebook and use Flipgrid on it? Well, mostly because it's a cloud-based platform, and all you need with the Chromebook is really the keyboard and the webcam, and you're all set to go. And all of the kids' videos are actually stored in the cloud online, so you can view them anywhere you like, and they can record them at home, they can record them at school, wherever they like. So it's a really winning combination. But for those people who go, okay, well, what the heck is a Flipgrid? I'll actually show you in just a second, but this is one really important thing I just wanted to differentiate before I get any further. You've got, in Flipgrid, you've got a thing called a grid, okay? And you've got to think of a grid like it's your class, or a group. And it's almost like a small classroom, and you call it, I call mine Mr. Briley's classroom, or 6 Gold, or SHM staff if you're creating a Flipgrid, you know, for professional development for your teachers at your school. And you actually have a series of what's called topics and shared discussions. You create class activities, you create homework tasks, and that sort of stuff. You can actually have as many grids as you like, so you can have as many different groups. If you're a high school for a grid for every class that you teach, and within those topics, you can have as many topics as you like. But what are we actually creating? So I say, 3 ways to use Flipgrid. You can use it to create discussions. And then online discussions and discussions that can really take place over several days, and students can participate in the discussion at their leisure. You can actually, there's a couple of little neat tools in there where you can create assessments with it. And this is something that's really good, especially for us in Australia, with speaking and listening being such a crucial part of the English curriculum. But also, it's a really neat tool. Just a little tip here for those teachers who have to do running records. You can actually ask a child to go and read a book, and you can record them, and then you can listen to them and watch what they're doing at the same time, and then fill out the running record later by recording them, which is a really neat tool. But there's also some great tools on there for giving feedback to students. And the last one is, might not be everyone's favorite thing, and it's certainly not my favorite thing to mark, but it's actually a really cool thing to do for homework. And it's something that my kids actually come back to ask for because they really enjoy using Flipgrid. So what I'd like to do now is just actually take a look at what Flipgrid actually looks like. And this is my account. I've got a bunch of different grids, and you can see that I've, various summits and that sort of thing. I'm actually going to make a new grid today just to show you what it looks like. We're going to call this one today the Virtual Summit. And so you can call this anything you like. You can give it the name of your class, you can give it the name of your school, whatever you wish, the name of your subject. And in here, I can actually create my own little URL so that my students or my staff or whoever's looking for it can actually find it. And so I've actually used flipgrid.com/virtual summit. I'm surprised that that's actually still available.
Hey, Nick.
And you can customize it. Yep.
Just because we are actually running not a competition, but we actually are running a Flipgrid in association with the virtual. So I might just get you to call that Virtual Summit demo, just so we don't get it confused with the other main one.
Gotcha. Virtual Summit demo it is. Fantastic. And I can actually select a community type up here, so I can actually get students can only access it if they have a certain domain name in their email. So for mine at school, it's sidstu.catholic.edu.au. I can actually input a list of my students, or I can make it completely public. And so for today, I'm going to make ours public just so that anyone who's interested can come back to it another time. And you can actually add a password to it if you wish. I'm not going to put a password on it today, but that might be a little security feature that might be useful with your students. So my grid's ready. I'm all set. Great. I can go in, and now it looks like this. There's a few little interesting little tools here. So I can add a co-pilot. That's adding another teacher, and you can just go and invite them via email. I can actually make it active or inactive. So at the end of the year, I choose not to use it anymore. I can set it to inactive. This is the share button, so I can actually send a link to my students and show them where it is. I've got a few different options here. If I want to duplicate, if I've got a set of topics that I've designed before the school year has started, I can just duplicate it for all the classes that I'm teaching the same curriculum to. And there's a bunch of other options here as well, and I can come back and edit it at any time. But what I really wanted to share with you is setting up a new topic, and that's what we're looking at in setting up a discussion or assessment or for homework. So this is what it looks like when you head in, and you can set up a topic and tell your kids exactly what you're going to be going on about. You can give them a little tip about how best to answer it. A good thing is that you can actually set a time limit. There are some kids who would talk for 5 minutes if you gave them the opportunity, but there's also some kids who maybe you want to limit to 30 seconds to make sure that what they're saying is really concise, and they have to make sure that they address the answer in that certain time. There's another little option here you can give for topic privacy, where, if there's a couple of kids you're a little bit worried about submitting things without you seeing it first, you can actually go and moderate that. If I decide I don't want it active just yet, I want it to be set up on Sunday night, but I'm going to use it on Thursday. So I'm setting it up on Sunday night when I've got a bit of extra spare time. I can actually make it inactive for now if I don't want to, and then I can actually turn it off at whatever date I don't want. Now, this is really good for inspiring a bit of discussion with your students. I can record a video and tell them exactly what I'm looking for, or any other video that might inspire the discussion. I can upload a video I made somewhere else. So if I've made something in iMovie or somewhere else, I can put that in. If I found a video on Vimeo or YouTube, I can just add that in. I can upload an image for them to discuss, or a Giphy, which my kids love. And you can just put in a little keyword here, such as happy, and it'll come up with a range of GIFs. Some people really like that. My kids like seeing them. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. If there's something here, if I've prepared a little assessment for them, or I've prepared a stimulus in a doc or in a slide somewhere else that is online, I can actually just put that in here. So I can set up the assessment, I can share them the rubric, I can set up my expectations and exactly what they have to cover in their assignment. I can put that in there and give it a little title, which is a great little option there. I can also give the kids a few options for when they submit their video. So my kids really, really like when they've submitted their video to give themselves a bit of a cover. And I'll head back to my slides here just to show you. I'll actually head into here to show you what it actually looks like when it's all completed. And these are some of the things that you can do with your kids. So they really like putting the finishing touches on. As you can see, you've got sunglasses and flowers and all this sort of thing, and you know, animations and all that sort of thing. So that's something that I can actually set up for the kids. This one. Yeah, so they can set up and they can customize it themselves. I can also make sure that the kids can actually reply to each other, which is a nice feature that hasn't been around for too long, but it's a really powerful one, especially if you're trying to stimulate that discussion, just the same as you would when you're in a classroom. It's really, really great little option there. And this is one I really wanted to talk to you about because it's really great for assessment. So I've got two options here. I can just go for basic feedback, which is just their performance and their ideas. Sure, and I can give them some marks on that. But I can also go over to here to custom feedback and add my own criteria. So based on what they're submitting, or based on the rubric, or based on the content that I need them to show me, I can then go and put in my own criteria. So we've done a lot of talking about method, manner, and matter when the kids are doing public speaking. So I would talk in that, and I would say, okay, if it's your method, what exactly am I talking about there? So you would need to make, include things like how are they delivering it? How well are they doing it? Are they clear? Are they making sense? And I can actually give them a score between 1 and 10 or 1 and 5 or out of 3 or whatever it is. And then they can actually receive the marks, which is quite a nice little feature as well. So that's how you set it up. What I'd like to do now is actually show you a couple of things that I've done with my kids. This here is one of my favorite ones that we did with the kids, and I actually sent it to them. This was actually part of their homework. And for those of you who may not have seen it before, the Google Assistant at the recent I/O conference, they actually announced a really cool feature about what the Google Assistant can do for you from now on. What I'll do, I'll just play this video. If the sound isn't working, folks, just yell at me, but it should work. The next thing you're going to hear is a short video from Google about the newest feature that they've planned for their Google Assistant.
So how can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a woman's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now. Okay, we have a 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's her first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks. Great. Have a great day. Bye.
Okay, so that's just one little tool, and it's pretty cool, and that always gets a bit of a wow when I show that to people. And the kids, when I showed it to them first time, their minds were blown. Their tiny minds were blown. So I thought, okay, well, we're going to have to do something with this. So the activity that I shared with them was Google Assistant and Siri are being used more and more to help humans do activities and chores. They're designed to help us so that we can spend time doing things that are more important. And one example is the assistant calling a restaurant or a hairdresser. So the task was, apart from schoolwork or homework, what would you program the Google Assistant to do for you? And what might not be good about Google Assistant doing more and more for us? Might Google Assistant and Siri be making us lazier? So this is an opportunity for them at home, or sometimes at school, but mostly at home, to go and really think about this and prepare a response and be a little bit willing to be put up for feedback with their classmates and share their ideas. This is one of my students, so I'm going to show you. This is her response to it. I'll just put the audio through.
Google, can you make a delicious dinner for me? That sounds fun, but I'm better at finding recipes, takeout or a restaurant. As you can see, Google can't make dinner for you yet. But imagine if it could. You could have whatever you want every night, and that would be great. The food would be delicious and you would have to do nothing. The Google Assistant would do it all for you. Right now, it's not possible, but I'm sure in a few years it will be, and that will be great. Every night, you could have pizza, pasta, Italian, Chinese, whatever you want, all cooked by your good old Google Assistant. So I hope in the future, Google can make dinner for me every night of the week. I'm sure it will be delicious.
Okay, so as you can see here, there's a little button here where I can click on to reply, and I can reply in a video of my own. You can also see the kids' views that they get for their videos. The kids can actually like each other's videos. So we're sort of seeing some of those features of something like a YouTube, which, as we know, all the kids are very much involved with. And bringing all those sort of features and that validation that they get from putting up a video on the internet, expressing themselves a little bit, and that's a really nice little feature. What I did want to do before I wrap up for today, before I take any more questions, I just wanted to really briefly walk you through what it looks like as a student when they're submitting something. So this is obviously me, and this is the screen record screen. This is a really nifty tool up the top here where I can actually see how high my voice is. If I'm too high, if I'm too close to the screen, it might, if I put my microphone up here, it probably is going to get too loud. It's going to go in the red. So I can modulate and make sure my voice is really nice and clear. Another thing that I can even go and do over here is put on a sticky, and I can actually make some notes about exactly what I wanted to say during the talk. And I've also got a time limit up here. And what I can do, if I can start to record, and then I can start recording now, and then I think, oh, okay, yep, I've got a few ideas out. Actually, I need to pause for a second. And then I can take a minute, pause, and just collect my thoughts and go, okay, yep, I want to record again. And then I'll finish my thoughts, and then I'll be able to submit it. Great, fantastic. And then it lets me review it. I can actually hear it in my headphones. I know you can't hear it at the moment, but yep, I'm reviewing it. Looks great, fantastic. So I can actually download the video, I can cut it, I can do a little bit of edit to it, I can put titles on it, I can attach things to it, which are really nifty features. And some of those are brand new, not been around very long. This is one of the kids' favorite bits where they actually get to snap a little selfie of themselves. And then they can draw all over it, they can put in one for the kids. They really like any device. There's an iOS app for it that we actually use at school. The kids actually really like using that, the app, but we also do use it on Chromebooks a fair bit. And I've found that when we do use Chromebooks, that the kids actually seem to like using Flipgrid a lot more, and they find that they have a few more options. So Flipgrid and Chromebooks are a real winner. Chris, I wonder if anyone's got any questions before my time runs out.
That's a good question. Thanks, Nick. That was awesome. I'm just going to try. Can you just stop sharing your screen?
I'd love to stop sharing. There we go.
That was great. And I'm going to announce to people in a minute that we are actually running a Flipgrid thing here as part of the virtual, and for people to maybe capture an idea or two that has struck them in what they've seen so far, and and leave us a comment in a Flipgrid. But no, that was really cool.
Fantastic.
Thanks for doing
that. It's a great tool, one of my favorite tools, and probably one of my kids' favorite tools that we use in the classroom.
Yeah, fantastic. And I've got to say, it was I think Flipgrid was a Minnesota-based company. And
it still is, yeah.
And they were doing amazing things, and everyone loved Flipgrid. And then Microsoft bought them, then turned around and made them free for all teachers. So I think kudos to Microsoft. That's an awesome thing for them to do. So thanks, Microsoft.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great tool. So yeah, thanks, Nick. That was fantastic, mate.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, no worries. We will be moving on. So, I guess that's me next. So I'll share that and so you can see that. So I'm doing a session called Creating Rich Media on a Chromebook. And I'm kind of cheating a little bit here, because if I just go back to stop presenting that for a second and turn my camera on, you'll see I'm sitting here at a table. Hi. And I've got my Mac here, and I've got the Chromebook here. And if I was being honest and authentic about this, I'd be doing the demo on the Chromebook, but the Chromebook's actually doing other stuff to make this broadcast happen. So I'm going to cheat a little bit and do my demo in Chrome on the Mac, but it does actually work exactly the same on the Chromebook. So I just want to give that little disclaimer before I start. Let me switch over to this slide deck. And we'll go there and present. And sorry, I'm juggling way too many things here. Present to everyone. Can you guys tell me, please, can you see my screen on that? It should say the virtual Creating Rich Media on a Chrome.
No, I'm still seeing you, Chris.
Are you now? Okay. Because I got to press this button and actually share my screen. I did a Nick. There you go. If I just do that, and now I do that. What about now? Now can you see my screen?
Yes, Chris.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. So creating rich media on a Chromebook. One of the things that we noticed at the school I was teaching at when we introduced Chromebooks, so we'd been originally Microsoft school, and then we went to G Suite, and we introduced G Suite primarily because we wanted mail. We were just sick of dealing with Exchange servers and stuff like that. So we actually, the trigger for us to move to G Suite was in fact to get Gmail, which I know is not, a lot of schools don't use the Gmail component. They mainly want it for Drive. We went for Gmail, got Drive as a side benefit. And what a side benefit that was. I mean, it completely changed the way the school operated in terms of, document creation and collaboration and everything else. And then it was a couple of years later when Chromebooks first appeared on the scene that we bought, I think it was like 5 or 10 Chromebooks just to try them out, and they were hugely popular with the kids. So we bought another 10 and then another 10 and then another 10. I think by the time I left the school, we had well over 100. And I believe the school now is going all in on Chromebooks, and pretty much they've moved away from Windows as a platform, and now every student is using a Chromebook, which is like awesome. Obviously, there's a lot of benefit there in going to the Chrome platform. One of the things that we often say, if you're moving from say Windows to Chrome, then you used to have say Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and then you come over to the Chromebook and now you've got doc sheets and slides. Okay, fantastic. But what about all the other stuff? What about what you used to have Publisher? What do you do for publishing now? And you might have had movie production programs or audio production programs, and suddenly you come to a Chromebook and everyone goes, well, if it's one of these computers that need to operate on the internet, or maybe it's not so good at creating actual multimedia, rich media. So I just want to show you a couple of ideas here for how you can build rich media using a Chromebook or Chrome. I mean, you can just do it inside a Chrome browser if you like on a Windows or Mac, but this all works on a Chromebook as well. Before I do that, just a couple of things. I talk to lots of teachers about using technology, and one thing that consistently comes up, especially with the use of Chromebooks, is a lot of them don't realize some of the gestural shortcuts for using Chromebooks. So I've just put some of them on the screen there. You can see what was a right click on a conventional computer. Chromebooks don't actually have a left and right side of the trackpad at all. It's just all one trackpad. So to get a right click, you just do a 2-finger tap. Most Mac users know that because it's sort of a gestural thing that carried over from the Mac, but a lot of Windows users never sort of had that experience and so don't often sort of realize that you can do that on a Chromebook. Similarly, the two-finger drag, if you drag up and down on the trackpad with 2 fingers, that's the equivalent of scrolling the page up and down. One of the most inefficient things you can do on any computer when you want to scroll a long page up and down is to sort of move your mouse over to the right-hand side, hunt around to try and find the scroll bar, click on the scroll bar, drag down the scroll bar. If you've got to do that every time you try and move a page, it becomes incredibly inefficient and slows you down a lot. So 2-finger drag, just 2 fingers on the trackpad, drag up and down, that'll move the page. The other thing on a Chromebook is a 3-finger drag. If you put 3 fingers on the trackpad and push up or down, it brings what's called an exposed windows mode, or from the Mac. If you lived in Macland for a while, you know it's called expose. And it's about exposing all the active windows that are currently running. It's a great way to switch between active windows. And finally, the other little shortcut on the Chromebook is if you touch with 3 fingers on the trackpad and you slide left or right, you actually switch tabs. And a lot of people just aren't aware of some of these shortcuts, so I'll just point them out. Also, just on the screen there, I'll just give you some shortcuts for doing screenshots. So I don't know what you call that button, but the button with the little windows on it, it's the one above the 6 key on a Chromebook. Control and that button will give you the whole screen capture. If you go Control Alt and that button, it will capture the active window. And if you go Control Shift and that button, it'll give you a little cursor. You can then slide around the screen and highlight an area, and that becomes your screen capture. So, you know, especially if you're making multimedia, very often you do want to create a screen capture, and there are the shortcuts there on the Chromebook to do that. In terms of accessories you can use on a Chromebook for multimedia, I mean, your standard mouse, microphone, headsets, webcams, all of those things, external hard drives, all that stuff, all plugs into a Chromebook, all works just perfectly fine. So all your standard multimedia making accessories work just great. Now, so here's a couple of suggestions for you. Ebook publishing. So I mentioned, you know, we had Word, PowerPoint, Excel. We go to DocSheet Slides. What about making sort of, you know, published books? Well, Book Creator, which was in fact at one point, I think, one of the most popular apps for iPad users, has now made its way over to Chrome. So if you and all of these things, you know, just search for it. Like Book Creator, just go to Book Creator and Google it and you'll find it. And it works exactly the same as it did on the iPad. It has all the features, including the built-in ability to upload audio and do clickable sort of hot links for audio. That's all there. It has the read to me feature. So once a student builds a book using Book Creator, they can have it read to them using text to speech, which is just amazing. But that, you know, it's all built into Chrome there now. If you get more serious about publishing, there's a fantastic tool called Lucid Press, and it is, I guess, the nearest equivalent in Chrome to something like Publisher, or not quite InDesign, but same kind of thing. And it actually will import IMDD files from InDesign. So if you are doing multimedia or rich media in the form of desktop publishing, Lucid Press is kind of the Chrome-based Rolls-Royce in terms of publishing tools for online. Definitely worth checking out. And what I like about Lucid Press is you can publish for the web as well as publish to print. So as you're making your pages and stuff, you can insert things in them that are typical desktop publishing stuff, like text boxes and images and that kind of thing. And then when you export it to PDF, you'll get you know, sort of printable kind of pages, as you'd expect from a desktop publisher. But you also have the option to insert things like active buttons that link out to sites. You can insert YouTube videos. You can actually load multiple images into a single image frame, which actually doesn't make any sense at all in print. But when you publish it into an interactive format with Lucid Press, things like that, you end up with playable videos in the page. So, you know, you can do your version of the Daily Prophet with Sirius Black screaming at you from the page because it's an embedded video in the actual page. Your button, hot link buttons that go out to places like, you know, Twitter or Facebook or wherever you want to link them to, they actually work. And of course, if you load multiple images into the same image frame, when you publish it interactively, you can then scroll through those with your finger. So it's a really, really nice publishing tool, and it solves that problem that people have of saying, well, I want to print it for paper, but I also would love to put it on the internet as well. So now you can do that basically with one step and kill two birds with one stone. In terms of editing, look, there's a ton of editing apps for video that are available out there. Sorry, not video, images. There's a ton of image editing apps. So, you know, taking a photo and changing its contrast and its color and its hue and you know, intensity and all that kind of stuff. By far the most professional and sophisticated of all these is a thing called Polar, P-O-L-A-R-R, and it is it rivals Lightroom in terms of functionality and what you can do with it. You have really, really fine control over the entire image. You've got sliders and curves and tones, and you can control the hue, saturation, and luminance. A lot of programs will let you do simple editing on an image. I mean, the image editing stuff in Google Photos is great, but if you really, really want to get serious about fine-tuning your images with masking and all sorts of things, Polar is definitely the way to go, and something you should look at if you're serious about image editing. Graphic design using Illustrator on a conventional computer. I mean, Illustrator, amazing program. I love it, but like, it obviously won't work on a Chromebook because Chromebooks need to do stuff that's cloud-based. So Gravit Designer is one you should probably check out. Gravit is, again, you know, like it's not Illustrator because it's really hard to get that sort of functionality in a browser, but it is amazingly capable as a vector editor, and it's got paths and you know, it's got blur effects and blending and all the sort of the really high-end stuff that you'd expect from a professional graphic design program. You can use with Gravit Designer, and it'll export out as SVGs and all sorts of sort of amazing formats. So if that's your thing, check out Gravit. For younger students, and even not so younger students, I really have to recommend Adobe Spark Video. Spark is a suite of 3 tools from Adobe. There's a family of tools that are collectively known as Adobe Spark, but within them there's Spark Video, Spark Page, and Spark Post. Spark Page makes web pages, Spark Post makes graphic designs, and Spark Video produces short videos, or maybe not so short if you prefer not to. But the key thing about all of these things from the Spark family is that they're incredibly easy to use, and they've been built specifically with the idea that people without high-level skills in making multimedia can produce multimedia that looks amazing. And that's really the strength of Spark. Now, within the Spark family, there's one called Spark Video. And calling it a video production tool is kind of misleading. It really is not a video tool in the same sense that a sort of a, you know, an iMovie or a Final Cut or something like that might be. Think of it more as being an animated slideshow. Sorry, a narrated slideshow. So the idea with Spark is you would put in a number of, quote, slides, and on each of those slides you can put text or images or icons, and even video if you want. It also works with video. And then what gets created at the end is you narrate each of those slides, and Spark will automatically add some music to each slide. Add a music soundtrack, but it strings your narrations per slide together in such a way that it feels like one nice integrated final piece of media. It's ridiculously easy to use, which makes it suitable for really anything from prep up, kindergarten, year 1, year 2, like they produce amazing stuff with this. But even your higher grades can use this and use it in a more sophisticated way, but tap into its simplicity. There's a bunch of themes you can apply. Each theme has a couple of slight variations in terms of color palettes and stuff. You know, I've had people say, well, you know, I like it, but, you know, it doesn't look exactly the way I want to look because I don't like that shade of pink that it uses or something. Well, you know, maybe this is not the tool for you. It is highly templated in the way it works, and that's its beauty, that it produces a really beautiful end result without a lot of input from the user, and that's really what you want in the classroom. You know, one of the things that teachers say all the time to me is, you know, I want my kids to do video products, or, you know, I want them to make graphic designs or posters or that kind of thing, but I just don't have time to spend to teach them Photoshop, or I just don't have time to, you know, teach them how to use a fancy editing program. So the nice thing about Spark is you don't need to do that. Simplicity is foremost. So if you haven't checked it out, Adobe Spark Video, it's just spark.adobe.com. And there is also an education version of it. If you actually look at spark.adobe.com/edu, there's some information on that page that will tell you how to enable it within your school domain for students that are under 13. And they, in fact, Adobe's nice enough to give everyone a pro account for the education users, so they get all the pro features at no cost, and you can do it under 13. It's a good thing. Capturing your screen. There's a lot of times when you're producing rich media, you want to be able to capture what's on your screen to share out to people, and just explain a process or describe something on your screen, maybe make a tutorial video. And so in the Chrome world, the best option for that is a thing called Screencastify. It's a Chrome extension. You can grab it from the web store. So you just fire up your browser, go to the Chrome web store, search for Screencastify and install it. It's completely free. There is a paid version. The paid version, I can't remember the price off the top of my head, but it's very affordable. It might be $20 a year or something. It's not a lot of money, and it does give you some extra nice features in terms of being able to post-produce the videos you make. So you can do some extra editing on the back end, maybe trim them down, crop them, all that sort of stuff. But certainly not a deal breaker. The free version is perfectly fine for what most people need, and definitely start there and just see if it does everything you want. You literally install it, click the record button. It will then record what's on your screen. You have the option of recording your webcam if you want. I personally think it's a great idea to add the webcam in, especially if you're doing videos for students. Students, believe it or not, really like to see their teacher in the videos. They actually relate to it more than just a video that is just a disembodied voice. Video production. So video production, I guess these next two ones I want to show you, video production and audio production. If we're talking multimedia, this is really where the rubber hits the road. So video production with WeVideo, WeVideo.com, go and check it out. It is a full-blown video editor. It is a piece of technical wizardry, how they managed to make this stuff actually work in a browser. It is quite stunning, the little functionality you've got. Again, there's a free version and a paid version. For school use, I think the paid version is actually worth springing the money for. And let's face it, if you were to buy a copy of, Final Cut or something like that, I think Final Cut is like $300 for one copy. So, the idea of, paying significantly less than that, I think it's a few dollars per student, maybe $5 or $6 per student to get them access to WeVideo. It's a heck of a lot cheaper than buying your typical video editing software, which of course doesn't run on a Chromebook anyway. What can you do in WeVideo? Well, it's got it's full track-based editing. It's a nonlinear video editor in the traditional sense. It has a preview window. It has a media bin. You can add as many video and audio tracks as you like. It's got full support for transitions, animated titles. You can import your own material in there. One thing I particularly like about it, you can import raw footage in to edit from a Google Drive folder. So if you just simply collect a few clips in a Google Drive folder, then you can go from within WeVideo and actually pull them straight out to edit those clips. Now, that has a nice little implication that if you put those clips into a folder and the folder happens to be a shared folder, then you can have multiple students all contributing assets into a shared folder, which then everyone else in the class can draw from. So that old problem, if you've done video editing for a while in schools, you've probably dealt with this problem before where you record it on the camera, but then how the heck do you get it from the camera into the computer? And there's a lot of mucking around to do that. With WeVideo going in via Google Drive, that is completely trivial. It's no longer a problem. You literally record from your device into Google Drive, and then you pull it in from Google Drive to WeVideo. Problem solved. When you export out, you can see there's a finish button up the top there. When you hit the finish button, it will export out in, depending on whether you're on a free account or a paid account, different resolutions. But the nice thing about it is it can go out to multiple destinations at once. So, for example, if you're going out to, you want to go to YouTube and put something in Google Drive and drop it in Dropbox and put it on Facebook, you can do all that with a single render. So one render pass, and then they push that final product out to the multiple platforms. It really is phenomenally good. It does support screen capturing, especially, well, in the paid version, it supports screen capturing. So it does the same kind of thing that Screencastify does. It supports narration, so you can narrate under a video track. You can put multiple audio tracks on, multiple soundtracks, multiple music tracks. And it also supports green screening as well. So if you want to do like a what they call it, a chroma key thing, you can definitely do it. And finally, I know I'm running out of time here, but music production and podcasting, if you've used something like GarageBand or Audacity or even Audition from Adobe, and you're on a Chromebook, check out Soundtrap. Soundtrap is full track-based music editor with amazing effects. It's got the full range of sound effects, chorus and echo and delay and everything you can think of. It does both MIDI and loops-based editing. It's a phenomenal piece of software and really is, I think, the canary in the coal mine to talk about what will be possible in Chrome from here going into the future. Anyone who looks at a Chromebook and says, well, they're good, but if only I could do sort of real work on them, you guys need to check out what Soundtrap can do, because that really shows you what's possible inside Chrome. All right, and with that, I'm going to escape out of there and head back over to here and stop sharing my screen. If I can figure out which button it is. This button, stop presenting. Okay. Hopefully that all worked. Stop sharing my screen. Right, I'm back. Hi. Where are we in the program today? That brings to a close the end here of our first section of the virtual, which was creating with Chromebooks. And I've got some prizes and announcements to do. And before I can do that, I'm going to call in two people that I would love to join us. So we have Sharon Cooper from New South Wales and Sydney, or Sydney and New South Wales. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Good, good. Where are you? You are in Sydney, aren't you?
Yep, I'm in Sydney.
Excellent. And across the ditch, we have Christy Yonatani, who's joining us from Christchurch in New Zealand. Hi, Christy.
G'day.
Lovely of you guys to join us. Thank you. And I've invited Sharon and Christy in here to talk about, because we're going to talk about summits. We, as I mentioned, the EdTechTeam runs a summit program, which is like 2-day events for teachers on all sorts of cool stuff. The sorts of stuff we're trying to highlight here in the virtual, but obviously a little bit more in depth. Sharon, tell us about your experience. You've gone to quite a few of our summits. Tell us about it.
Yes, I went to my first one last year in 2017, and then I went again this year. It's 2 days of full-on learning about everything, really, technology, tools, resources, and also it's making the connections with other educators who are all really excited to be there and to learn, as well as meeting the presenters.
Yeah, fantastic. And Christy, I met you in Dunedin this year. This year you came down from Christchurch to Dunedin, and tell us about that.
Yeah, I went to Dunedin because I'd been to the one in Christchurch a few years back and enjoyed it so much that I made the trek down to Dunedin to see the EdTechTeam again. And what I really love about the EdTechTeam summits is everyone's so accessible. You get plenty of chances to ask questions, and you get plenty of actual practical tips you can use in the classroom right away. So I really recommend them.
Awesome. And the food's not bad either.
The catering's not bad, and the presenters are
pretty good. Hey, listen, I'm going to just back up a bit here. I'm going to replace my video with this thing because there's a couple of things I want to tell people about. And feel free to jump in if you want to comment on anything. So we are broadcasting live, obviously, and we would love people to sort of contribute to the back channel here on #EdTechTeam and #TheVirtualSummit. So I've been kind of keeping my eye on the Twitter stream there. There's a few people saying a few things, but maybe if you guys in the call here just wanted to sort of push that out on your Twitters as well, that'd be good. I feel like I'm juggling a lot of things here, so anything you do to help me do that'd be awesome. And just mentioning again, EdTechTeam Australia New Zealand now also has our own Twitter account, so @EdTechTeam ANZ. Nick talked a lot about Flipgrid and what a cool tool that is in terms of allowing people to contribute ideas. If you head over to flipgrid.com/create2019, you'll actually find a Flipgrid there waiting for you. And I'm hoping that a few people out there in internet land will take an idea or two of something they've learned here while they've been watching the virtual, and maybe give us some feedback there on the Flipgrid. Now, we are giving away prizes as well. Sharon, how would you like a free ticket to the next summit?
Oh, that would be fantastic. It's already in my calendar.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're giving away some prizes today, and one of the prizes we're giving away is a free ticket to the summit. to any summit of your choice globally, in fact. So hopefully one of you Australian, New Zealand people will win it. But we've also got some books to give away. We've got some online courses to give away. So for anyone watching the stream, and I believe we have, well, there's quite a few viewers. Yeah, I'm not going to say the number, but it's a good number of viewers. Quite good. If you guys head over to edtech.team/thevirtualprize, you'll actually see a form there. You can fill that in and hopefully go into the draw and win a prize. Like I said, we're talking to Sharon and Christy. And so Sharon, have you, has there been anything at a summit where you've come along, you've learned some big idea and you've taken it back and actually used it in your classroom?
Yes, I have. I learned about the CS First coding program, and so since the summit in 2017, I've been running a coding club using that.
Awesome.
And so it's been fantastic. The kids come along every week, and if I can't actually have coding club that day, they're disappointed. So that's been great. With Nick talking about Flipgrid, I learned about that for the first time at a summit. And even listening to today's one, I really need to use that more than I have used it. You know, it's just, and I've also become, I was inspired to become a Google certified educator. So I've done my level 1 and level 2 since then.
And we are very proud of you. That's awesome. Oh, and I think we live in the same area roughly, because I remember bumping into hairdressers one time.
Yeah, which is very. It's funny, the connections you do make. Like you feel like you know them because you continue to see them on Twitter and things like that. So
yeah, absolutely,
it's great that way too.
Absolutely. And Christy, what about you? Have you picked up any ideas at summits that you've sort of actually gone back and done something?
Summits have made a huge difference to me in my school, actually. When I first started there, we had no devices, and I've launched Bring Your Own Chromebook. Last year, we had 70% uptake, and next year we're set for 1-to-1.
Right.
So that's going to radically change the way that we teach and learn, with every student at our school bringing their own Chromebook to school, and just making the most out of things like even just Google Classroom and slides. And people don't realize the full capabilities. I've got my Google Trainer 2 as well. Sorry, my Google Educator 2, and going for a trainer now. So it's given me heaps, and it's given my school and my students so much.
Awesome. I'm so pleased to hear that. One of the things we do hear a lot at summits, when people say, you know, people come along thinking they actually know quite a bit about all these tools, and then they actually go, wow, there's all this stuff I actually had no idea about. And it's quite expansive. It's something we keep hearing, and it sounds like you agree with that idea.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I'd only been using Google Classroom for about 2 terms at school when I went to the first summit. And since then, I've been able to present to other teachers at the school. And this year, I actually had a role at school where I'm team teaching with the other teachers to get them onto using Google Classroom, because I was the only teacher using it in my role. So now I've passed it on, and we've got every classroom in the school has Google Classroom, every teacher's using it, and it's been great. And all the tools, just getting them used to that, all the students as well. So
awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I love hearing those success stories. I'm just going to flip over to the slides again here. And so thanks, Sharon and Christy, for your input. I really, really appreciate you guys. And we love our EdTechTeam family and everyone who comes along. You're right. We do make really good connections, I think, out of these things. There's a list of all the things that's coming up that we know about so far. Obviously, there will probably be more to come. So we've got 5th and 6th of April, the Gold Coast. Our first one on the Gold Coast, really excited about that. Hoping we get a lot of people coming down from Brisbane and maybe even up from the north coast of New South Wales to join us for that. It is a lovely destination event. If anyone wants to sort of come along and go to the summit and have a bit of time in the sun afterwards, that'll be good. And then over in New Zealand on the 15th and 16th in Christchurch. Yay! Looking forward to Christchurch again. And I think, Christy, you said you might even come along with some people to that one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm bringing along as many of my colleagues as I can. I'm convincing everybody to go.
Fantastic. Love to hear that. And then 16th and 17th in Auckland. And yes, you read that right. We are actually overlapping 16th. So that'll be logistically, we'll be juggling that one, but it's going to be great because we'll probably have people moving between the two events. And It's going to be fantastic. And if you go to the Christchurch one, by the way, we have a little surprise event after the Christchurch one as well that I can't talk about just yet because it's not locked in. But if you come to the Christchurch one, expect some extra things happening on the 17th if you're still around. EdTechTeam will be at EduTech. People always get us confused. EduTech, EdTechTeam. We get called all sorts of crazy things. Our name is EdTechTeam. One word, no spaces, 3 capitals. But EduTech, which is another conference for teachers in Sydney, we will have an event there as well this year. We had a booth there last year where we run back-to-back sessions for 2 days. We had lots of people come by the booth and just sit and watch stuff, so that was awesome. 8th and 9th in Sydney, 11th and 12th in Melbourne. Canberra will also take place in July, although I can't tell you the exact date yet because I'm not sure. And it's pretty likely we'll do something in Adelaide in October as well, but again, that's to be confirmed. And I just want to also mention again, as well as summits, we have this brand new thing for next year called workshops. I know, catchy name, I know. We surveyed a whole bunch of people about the names and everyone just went, workshops. You know what that means? Call them workshops. But basically, they're like a one-day event of the best of the summits. So a lot of people can't get 2 days off for PD, but they could get 1. And so what we've done is condensed down all the best bits of a summit into a one-day event. And we are looking for schools that might be interested in hosting those. So if you are at a school and you think you'd like to bring EdTechTeam out to the school and host that one-day event, we have 4 different workshop program things to pick from at the moment, and we'll be expanding that as we go along, but we've got 4 to start with. Get in touch with us and let us know. Just send us an email at events.edtechteam.com.au, and we'd like to talk to you more about it. I mentioned we'll be giving away a free summit ticket to the location of your choice. We'll do that at the end of this Australia-New Zealand session, so probably closer to about 7:50 Australian Eastern Time tonight. So just before we wrap up and hand over to the UK, we'll also be giving away a free online course and a book. This is an awesome book. We talked about Adobe Spark before. This book is by Ben Forter and Monica Burns. Ben Forter works for Adobe and is the guy who basically wrote or conceived Spark. He actually wrote a little thing called Cold Fusion, which you might have heard of. So Ben and Monica have written this book. It's getting rave reviews everywhere. We published it, they wrote it, and there's also this other book by Sylvia Duckworth. And if you've been on the internet ever, you've seen Sylvia's sketch notes. She does the most amazing drawings, and she's now got this book. This is her second book. The first book was a bunch of examples of sketch notes for teachers. This book is how to do sketch noting for teachers. So we're very excited. We'll be giving one of those away as well. All right, don't forget edtech.team/the virtual prize if you want to be in the draw for any of those things. And I'm trying to stick to schedule here, and I'm just going over, so I said I wouldn't do that. EdTechTeam, that's us. Like, handing over, I'll come back to that one. Our next section here is called Creating Real-World Problem Solvers, and I'm going to hand it over firstly to Alfina Jackson. Alfina, I'll let you introduce yourself because I apparently get it wrong every time I try and introduce anyone. But you're going to take us through building student agency with Flip Learnings. Over to you, Alfina.
Thank you so much, Chris. So I'm Alfina. I am from Sydney, and I'm currently a primary teacher. I teach 4-5, yes, cross-stage composite class at a new school in Sydney's Inner West. And I'm here to talk about student agency. And I'm just going to share my screen so that I can bring up the slides. Okay, I'm also a Google Certified Innovator from the 2014 Academy, and I am talking about Flip Learning. So this year I was named one of the Flip Learning Global Initiative's top 40 educators leading Flip Learning worldwide. And I've made that list for 3 years in a row, which is very exciting. So for those of you who don't know what Flip Learning is, and there's so many different definitions on the internet, and this is probably one of the best ones I've found, it's just a different form of pedagogy where the lecture or homework and elements are reversed. So typically short videos are sent home, which means the exercises are done at school, which makes school a lot more practical, and videos are sent home which is the learning side, the explicit teaching. But I work in a primary school, and previously I've spent a large bulk of my time in infants. So I do something called in-flipping, which is flipping within my learning environment, which essentially allows me to basically duplicate myself. So I might be explicitly teaching in person a small group, and another small group or several small groups might be watching pre-recorded videos that I've created or created by somebody else to explicitly target whatever their learning intention is for the day. And that allows me just to differentiate or to cover a variety of different student needs at once. And why do I do it? If I go to Simon Sinek's Golden Circle, always come back to the why. Why do I do flip learning or in-flipping? And as I described, I do it because I want students to be a lot more independent in their learning. When I first started video learning, as I called it, it didn't have the name flip learning. And all I wanted was my 5-year-olds at the time to be a bit less needy, as everyone knows kindergarten students are like. I was in a very exploring environment where students were engaging in self-directed learning, but I needed to cater for all those self-directed learning needs. And I use video learning to do that. So if I pull out some words from this definition, video student agency refers to a level of autonomy and power that links the student experiences in the learning environment. Student voice and agency are intrinsically linked. Agency gives students the power to direct and take responsibility for their learning, creating independent and self-regulating learners. And this definition is from Education and Training Victoria, which is one of the best definitions I've found. So what is the link between agency and flip learning? So here are some of those keywords from that definition: autonomy, power, self-direction, independence, and self-regulation. And if I start looking at flip learning, I have very similar key terms. Students become self-directed learners. They are in control of their learning because the video is in their hands. They have independence to watch that video as they please. And I'll be giving a few tips further in the presentation about how you can build students' ability to be self-directed learners and how they can gain that independence. They have accountability. Just like if you're giving an in-person explicit lesson and the child is not doing what they're meant to be doing, you hold them accountable in some form or another. If they're not going to watch that explicit lesson, they have to understand that they're like viewing the video. They have to be accountable for the fact that they're not going to be able to reach the learning intention and be successful in their learning. And flip videos also increases student self-efficacy. I, for example, am hearing impaired and I constantly miss things. And sometimes I feel like I just wish I can pause that person and rewind them and hear it again, especially when everyone's laughing at a joke that someone said at a dinner party. I often miss those. So having a flipped video or an in-flip video in their hands gives them the confidence to go back and watch something that they've missed, or maybe play something back through a little bit slower. And that brings the control back into the students' hands. So in this case, the teacher becomes a facilitator of learning. And the first thing they have to do is model how to use video as a learning tool. When I first hand videos to students, and they tend to just go, oh, I'm watching a video, oh, fun, let's have a bit of a party. And students also, unless they have some sort of blinkers on where they know what their learning intention is, they get distracted by the playlists on the side or any suggestions that pop up at the end of the video if it's through YouTube. They have to learn how to use it as a learning tool. And so as a teacher, it's a good idea to explicitly model. And I know when we're modeling how to read or model how to answer a question, we do think alouds. So do a think aloud with a video and teach students how to pause the video and explain out loud, why are you pausing? Why are you rewinding and replaying that section? And verbalize your thinking so that they can see that videos are actually learning tools, and go through the watching process. I like telling my students on the first watch, it's passive. You watch the video from beginning to end, and my videos are always quite short. They're not very long. You just watch it. On the second watch, you be a bit more active. You obviously have a purpose for watching, and this is where you start fulfilling that purpose by taking notes or filling a graphic organizer, or whatever the purpose of the video is. And the third watch, and after that third watch, is to clarify your understanding. You might only go back and watch a small section. You might only want to watch the end bit or the example or one certain part. And teach students how to develop strategies to clarify understanding. Lately, I've been doing some flipping with mathematics, and I've had the maths dictionary on the table, and I've said, if I talk about scaling triangles and I'm not making it quite clear, go to the maths dictionary. So giving them other tools to teach them how to clarify their understanding. And that helps them be successful. And that's the main point of learning. Also model what to do while watching. So how to take notes, how to fill in a graphic organizer. If there are examples where you need to pause and do something, how do you do that? So as a teacher, again, you need to set them up for success. So model what to do while watching. And then model what to do after the video. What independent tasks do students have to do after they finish watching that video? How do they review their learning later on? I have a colleague who has made some great biology HSC videos, and she, even though she doesn't teach anymore, she's noticed how those videos spike during the trial and HSC periods because people go back and review concepts. So teach students, if I need to solve this problem using multiplication, and I know I have a video in the past that I've seen, how do I go back and review my learning so that I can then come back to that problem? And how do I challenge my learning? How do I extend my learning? So as a teacher, you need to encourage students. Well, they may watch something and go, hey, I know that. Well, I want to learn this next. How do I go about finding that? So I'm just going to give you a few examples of how I've used in-flipping in my classroom. And this example are just screenshots from one of my first series of videos that I created when I had kindergarten many, many years ago. And I had a very high EALD or ESL, English as a second language or additional dialect group of students. And I wanted to teach these students in kindergarten how to take notes. So when I created these videos, as you can see from the screenshots, I put keywords in a different color. And in these videos, I'm reading the text at the bottom, but the students were given the retrieval chart. And so when I talk about food, as you can see, this is the first screen goes, cockatoos eat fruit and seeds. I've taught the students how to pause and how to copy the words fruit and seeds, and so forth. And if a child came to me after they finished that independent task and said, oh, miss, I've got all my information about cockatoos and fruit and seeds was spelt wrong, I would actually tell them, you've got some words incorrect. Go back and watch the video again and see if you can figure out which words are incorrect by pausing the video. And they would go back and fill in and double check their spelling and double check they had everything on that retrieval chart. From this task, so during week 1, all students will be watching a video. In the second week of the cycle, I'd have all students in front of me with their book open to the retrieval chart, and they would help me joint construct an information text about cockatoos. This is because they need field knowledge. This is they're building the field before they come to help me with the joint construction. Otherwise, I'll be the one completely leading it. And even students who'd struggle with their learning were able to contribute to that discussion because they had watched the video, we had built their field knowledge, and then they had all the keywords in front of them. Another example that I did earlier this year for my composite class, a composite class obviously has students ranging from a range of levels, and my current composite class is no exception. I have students working at year 4 level, students working at year 5 level, students even though they're in year 5 working beyond, and students even though they're in year 4 working below. So after pre-testing, I created 3 groups of slide decks, which I shared out on Google Classroom and to the particular group of students. And I've just put screenshots of the slide deck, and you can see I have videos embedded. So group 1 has 3 videos embedded in their slide deck. So slides beyond slide 6 would be problem-solving tasks or activities to help them self-direct their learning. And if they needed any assistance, I would say go back and watch one of the videos. Same as group 2 and group 3. From here, I would say to all groups, right, group 1, group 2, go watch the videos. Group 3, sit with me, and I might explicitly teach a lesson with them. By the time I've done my quick 5-minute lesson, I'd send off group 3, right, group 2, come to me. Okay, who managed to watch the video? Okay, touch base to where they are at that point. I might take off from where most of them were, or I might explicitly teach a few examples, and so forth. The beauty of this is that all the students can refer back to the videos as they're working through some of the problem-solving tasks. And as you can see from the group 2, I have linked in a fact sheet from a great website, School A to Z, which is a government website, which also supported their learning as well. So I don't just use videos, but I also teach them to use other resources at their fingertips. My final example is actually a task I finished completing with my students last week. And it was a 2D and 3D shape assessment. And I provided the students with an A4 sheet of paper. Yes, I do use paper in my classroom, where I've provided us learning intention as success criteria with everything that a certain problems was going to cover. So they were given a massive problem with the success criteria, but then I also provided them with the marking rubric. And as you can see in the marking rubric, the orange is year 4 and the blue is year 5. I've provided the different levels of the marking rubric, but also if they are self-assessing themselves and they want to move into the good and amazing section and they're not quite sure, they can scan the QR code and they can watch a video that I've created or a great video that's been created by somebody else. Especially these ones about drawing 3D shapes. Don't have to use videos created by you. And they can scan that and they can go watch that. And if they still don't understand, they can come to see me. And most of the students will come up to me saying, I watched a video, it's helped me. Do you mind just clarifying 1 or 2 things? And this also encourages them to self-assess their own learning, as well as find out where their own personal gaps are. That means that I can be helping individual children who require a bit of extra support, or I can be extending some of the students who need extension. And so if you'd like to learn more, you're welcome to visit my 2 YouTube channels to see some of my videos that I've created, especially some of my very early ones. You'll see that videos don't have to be perfect. And see some examples where students have created videos of their own, which then they've discovered that they can then become teachers themselves, which is another layer of agency. So I might head back to and stop sharing my screen and come back here. And if there are any questions that have come up on the feed, Chris, I'm happy to answer those.
Alpina, that was awesome. That was so good. That was so good. I can see why you're a recognised Flipgrid expert person. You really, really handle all that amazing. Well.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I've noticed. I just want a big shout out to Deb Loves Libraries, Deb Hogg, someone I've known on Twitter for a while. And I noticed Deb is following our Twitter feed and she's retweeting like a crazy person. So thanks for that, Deb. And you've been tweeting up a storm. So thank you. I am trying to follow the Twitter here, but I'm also trying to do a lot of things. So I haven't seen any specific questions for yours, but
I'm just reading some of the tweets now, and it's just people commenting on the video, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
so
fantastic.
I'm happy to answer any questions post-conference.
You know what? I just, speaking of flipped learning, I made a video for some Year 11 students one time because I had to explain latitude and longitude to them, and I just thought, people are asking, I'll just make a video, and I put it out on the internet, and I just checked, and it's got 133,000 views.
Wow!
It really is kind of stunning that, like, we do these things for our kids sometimes, but if we're just prepared to share a little more widely, that it actually, some of these things help people that are far beyond the group of people we think we're helping.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting. Oh, Alfina, thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Really, really cool. And if anyone's got any questions, at Geeky Oz Teacher, you can get in touch with Alfina, and she has lots and lots of expertise in lots of areas, as you can see. And you work in a pretty amazing school too. I've seen lots of photos of your school.
Well, we're meant to finish very soon, so keep that posted with that one.
Okay, awesome, fantastic. All right, it is time to head over across the ditch. We're going over to New Zealand now, to Auckland. Steve Smith, are you with us? Oh, unmute.
Yep. Oh, there we go. No,
I'm going to hand over to Steve. Steve is giving us a talk here, which is why have I lost my thing? Oh, there it's not. I haven't lost it. There it is. So Steve's giving us a talk called "How do we ignite a passion for action in our students?" which I think wins the prize today for the second longest title for a presentation.
So close.
Phil Carew wins the prize for the longest.
That was always my plan. I was hoping to get the longest. Oh, man.
So, Steve, I'm going to hand over to you to tell us all about it.
Hey, thanks very much, Chris. I'll just jump straight into my slides here. Let me jump over. Oh, there we go. So, yeah, so my incredibly long title here is "How do we ignite a passion for action in our students?" So I'm a social sciences teacher. I teach social studies and geography. And within the social studies context, I really try and build a passion for action in our students so they can become part of a global team, part of a team where they can actually be part of the world they live in. So some examples we start off, first of all, is to lay the groundwork for these students. When we talk about becoming activists or a passion for activism or getting involved even, is what are some great examples of other students that are, I guess we could say, activists. And I think you're thinking about someone who took on a huge problem is, and a lot of people are very familiar with Malala's work, where she was a young girl who took on the Taliban in Pakistan, looking at education. She had a passion instilled in her by her father. She was shot. She came back from a horrific attack and went on to win the Nobel Peace Prize, gave some amazing speeches. And I often use Malala as an example of someone who just said, you know what, this is enough. And I want to take action. I want to get involved. So the students, I think, really identify with someone who came from a very humble background and just decided that enough was enough. Another great example I use to create curiosity within the students is the 2014 umbrella protests in Hong Kong. It was a bunch of students who decided to get involved in supporting the idea of democratic elections. And they carried all these amazing umbrellas. And so when you saw it on television or on the web or wherever you happen to get your news from, it was an amazing spectacle to see. And this was, again, just a bunch of students who said, no, enough's enough. We want to have our say, and we're going to get out and we're going to get involved. So I believe that starting with an example for students is a really great way to create that passion in them. So after we've created that passion, what can we do as educators to help create a desire to stand up, speak out, or report to others? Because I think a big part of this is that students are able to report what they find to their peers, and there are some other ways they can report back to the wider world. And many of those tools we've seen already in some of these amazing presentations that have been before mine, which I've been lurking around watching. And there is some amazing stuff here that we can use to connect to the outside world. So thinking about what's happening out in the outside world, I think a really great start is just showing the kids what's out there, current events pages that are from ranges of sources. And I think it's really important to go for a range of sources so that we are getting a really wide overview of global events that can help to begin a conversation. And you'll see there's a little article I grabbed from an online news site overseas, one about a New Zealand fisherman who pulled an 18-month-old baby out of the sea, and the baby was alive. So one of those little things that begin a conversation in our classes. So starting with information and creating that wealth of information for the students, but also creating a passion in them to find out some more. So Time, Global News, Telegraph, all the great places we can go to look for ranges of information that can maybe make a student think to themselves, hang on a minute, I'm not too happy about that, or I'd like more people to know about that. So opening their mind is the first thing that I go to. In New Zealand, we mark something called ANZAC Day. ANZAC Day is the 25th of April. It marks the landings of New Zealand troops at Gallipoli in the war. It was an interesting day because it was a huge disaster. It was a terrible place for our troops to land, and we commemorate this every year, and it's really a special part of New Zealand history. And I thought, what's a best way to talk to students or to tell students about what happened? You can tell them the stories and you explain what happened, but being a social studies and geography teacher, I like to show people what these places are like. So one way that I like to use when we're talking about Anzac Day and talking about where they landed on the beaches and having to battle their way up hills, you can tell them all you want, but a great way to create the passion and a great way to create a link between the students is to be able to show them. So what I do is I use Google Earth to fly the students into Anzac Cove. Anzac Cove is the place where they landed. It has a unique geography. It has a pretty crazy landscape. And I've put there, with understanding comes empathy. So once the students can understand where these young men were dropped, what the place was like, then it helps to build that empathy. And again, it connects them with their history, and it does help to show them why we should be remembering these soldiers. Now I'm going to jump over to my next slide here, and I've embedded a little video here using Google Earth to fly into Anzac Cove, and I'm hoping this is going to work. So we'll just see how well this goes. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump from, there we are, starting in New Zealand, and I've just dropped a little pin over at Anzac Cove, and so we'll fly the students over there. And as we come into where it is, we're going to have a discussion about how far away from home they were. So this is looking on the beach down at Anzac Cove. We can have a look at the hills that are up there, the mountainous landscape, the fact that the beach was very, very close to the mountains. We're going to, of course, grab our little friend Pegman and bring him down and drop him into some pretty cool street view or some 360 imagery that's sitting down here. So as he flies in, we begin to look up and we move around this landscape and say to the students, imagine landing here and having to battle your way up this hill. Those hilltops were covered in guns, and that was your mission, was to head your way up there and try and catch those ridges. Now, I think once the students have seen what there is there, what the landscape is like, they begin to understand just how terrible it must have been landing in that position. So by showing the students what this place was like, we can build empathy in them. And by building empathy, we build that connection. Once they have the connection, they understand why it's so important. And then this, I believe, brings them to stand up, to speak out, to want to report to other people. So using Google Earth is one of those things that you can drop someone into a place and they begin to understand what it was like. Because for me, I can explain it all I want, but if I can show the kids, then I believe it's much more effective. So what we'll do now is I'll flick over to the next one. Now, thinking about those different places we've dropped the students into, I think the next step we go to is having students as reporters, or students telling people what they know, what they understand. And when they do this, a really important bit is it puts it into their own language. And the students are using their own language to talk about what they are interested in, what they're passionate about, or why we should remember Anzac Day, for instance. Now, another way we can do this is to use another Google mapping product using My Maps. Now, My Maps is great for showing where things are occurring. Students can use My Maps to show a lot of great information. And what it also does is it might mean that someone says, oh, I know that place. I didn't realize that was happening there. And it's a very different way of showing information. So by using current events or by using historical events that we're currently looking at, the students can look at them and report back to their classmates about what's happening around them, what's happening in the world, or what's happening that's important to them. So mapping the current events, all those things via My Maps shows where they are. Draws the students in, and again, they're learning from their peers. It's not just me talking to them, it's not just the teacher talking to them, it's their peers talking to them about things that are important to them. So again, what I've done is I've made a little video here to show you one way I've used it. So this was looking at different human rights around the world. And what the students did was they made a Google Sheet, put some information onto that, and then uploaded that sheet into Maps. So over in the side here, we've got a list of all the things that students have entered as what they saw as current human rights abuses, uploaded that sheet to a map, and then it turns up as a pin. So it's very different ways of showing information. And this can, of course, be built over the year, where you have a huge global picture of where the different events were happening or where the important aspects of history happened. And these are all student-created ones. They've had a look, they've found some things that they wanted to show on the world where they were happening, put it on a sheet, upload it to the map. And so it's all in their own language here, as you can see. And it's ways of them showing where stuff is, because spatially understanding where things are happening, I believe, is very, very important. So the students also, once they have found these things, want to see other students who are taking part in events globally or locally. Thinking globally and acting locally is one of the mantras I believe students need to live by. They don't need to be out there protesting, creating a global action, getting thousands of people involved, but they can start with a very local activity that can build. Our students can be globally active from the safety of their classroom. We can help them to be safe online. We can help them to present their information via maps or via other methods that people have been looking at in these last few presentations that have been on before mine. So our students can be part of a bigger thing. And by showing them where things happen, showing them the geography of a place, showing them what the place was like, we can connect them to what was happening. So build that passion and then give them a way of expressing it. Some other great examples of student activism you can show, keep building it up, keep building that idea that they can be active if they want to be. Now within Google Earth, there are Voyager layers, and the Voyagers are curated parts of Google Earth where there is a whole wide range of different information created by expert partners or created by the developers within Google Earth. And one of the great ones that really links this idea of students as activists is something called the Water Walkers. Now, I've taken a little clip out of this, and the Water Walkers is a group that has developed along the lines of students being involved with looking after their water. So, flip back again. Let's just go back into here. Let's try again. There we go. So looking at the Great Lakes, it's a story about the Great Lakes. So this is flying into the Google Earth Voyager. It has a whole bunch of pins that are preset. It has a whole lot of information about it. And the students can work their way through this and find out about the Great Lakes and find out about what this idea of junior water walkers and water walkers are. So as we click through this Google Earth Voyager, it flies us to the different places. You'll see there's some cards of information on the right-hand side that tells us, this is telling us about Thunder Bay, with a kid's perspective of their home. We click through each of these different places and it tells us about what's important about water in these areas. So the fact that 97% of water is too salty for us to drink, 2% is frozen in glaciers. So a lot of really cool information about water. So this clicks us through about all the information about the Great Lakes. So students can explore this, they can interact with the place, they can see what the place looks like. You can see as we fly through this Voyager, there are some great images on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side is all that knowledge. So this, again, connects students and shows them what it's all about. So it is linked to some National Geographic information here, and the students get all the background to what's happening around this area. Now, the Junior Water Walkers links in with this page here. So this is a group started by some ladies, which then led to a bunch of kids getting involved as well. So the Junior Water Walkers program is one of those things that any age of child can have a look at. Students right from very young to up in secondary schools can see how these students got involved in the Water Walkers project. And if you want to have a look at that Water Walkers project, there is a bit.ly up the top there that you can jump into and have a look at. So again, showing students how they can be involved, how they can be active, again, creates that possibility for them. Within the Google Earth Voyager layers, there are a couple other great ones that we can look at for people who have been activists. So the top one there is the Roots and Shoots Foundation by Jane Goodall. And Roots and Shoots is a youth service program where people can sign up and get involved in a whole lot of really great environmental campaigns. And the Google Earth Voyager there takes you through a whole lot of information around Jane Goodall, where she's working, what she's currently doing, where she has worked, and her story. So again, showing students really, really visually through Google Earth. Down the bottom one is looking at one called Women Voyagers, stories of women who are creating global change. And again, you can click through their stories showing where they're working, very, very visual, again, showing it spatially, which I think is very, very important. Students seeing where things are happening. So the Google Earth Voyagers give us some amazing information, they give us some great pictures, and they really connect globally where these things are happening. And the students can click through at their own time, they can jump out of it into some more information, and I believe showing students what's going on in the world will lead them to want to get involved in whichever way they see as most appropriate for them. So thinking about the last step, we've created that passion in our students. We've shown them some really important things. We've hopefully connected them to some of their history. Now, what do we do next? So there are different ways that we can make our students into reporters, give them a voice. Now, Google Sites are fantastic because they are blogs. They can be shared. You can have multiple people on them at once. And the great thing about sites is you can keep them using your privacy to within your organization or outside. They can be 100% open. Using Google Sites for posting the writing by the students is fantastic because it can update rapidly. You can give them a doc. They can be updating their one doc each, which is simply put on the site. And that's a great way for the students to become reporters. They can create a Google My Map, as I showed earlier, and they can update that as it goes. And again, those can be shared with anybody. So the beauty of these is that they are really easy ways to share information across the globe or within your classroom. You may have seen people using Hangouts or even mystery Hangouts where they chat to people in affected areas. Bringing a person into your classroom via Hangouts is fantastic. You don't have to bring the person physically from overseas. You don't have to take your kids out of the class to different places. The only tricky one of this, of course, is time zones. And us down here in New Zealand, our time zones are a little bit wonky with everyone else. So we have to either do early morning or late evening if we're going to use these, or pre-record them, obviously, as well. I had a little chat about Google Earth, and Google Earth can show people where the different places are by dropping pins around Earth or creating little flights around Earth. You can show people different places. Just simply sharing a location with someone that they can fly into builds that understanding. Also using Tour Creator is another fantastic product where we can create our own tours, similar to what you see with the Voyagers, where you can jump around different places, put some information in there and immerse people in 360 imagery. If you haven't played with Tour Creator, it's a great way for students to create information to show others what a place is like. And again, link that understanding of place. And I think students need to understand place to get that spatial understanding of our world, where things are happening and where the important things in their history have occurred, whatever their history happens to be. So thinking back with what we'll create, or what will you create? Students explore their world through all the different tools I've had a look at so far, which are all freely available for everyone. Students engage with current events or with history, but the idea is creating that link so students do engage with what's happening now or what's happening in their past. And of course, their past within a classroom may be different than the person they're sitting next to or the person they're sitting in front of. So there are many different pasts and many different histories that you can engage with. Students can also realize that they have a voice, and engaging that voice in students to stand up or to simply say, you know what, I don't think that's right, and give them a way to spread that voice. Create the opportunities to grow globally informed and connected citizens, because that's what we want our students to be. We want them to be globally connected. We want them to be informed, and we want them to have the opportunity to stand up and say, you know what, I don't think that's right. So connecting our students will create those opportunities for them. That's why I believe that this is one of the most important things that I can do as a social studies teacher, is create these opportunities for those kids. So that's my little wander through what I believe to be important as a teacher, for us to create those opportunities for kids and for us to allow them to have a voice. So that's my little wander through there, Chris. Nope, I don't think you've got your, I think, can't hear you there, mate.
How about that?
Oh, there we go. That's much better.
That was awesome. Thank you. I know how passionate you are about all the geo tools. I got a chance to spend some time with you over in California earlier this year, and spent some time with the Maps team over there.
Oh, so good.
There is some amazing stuff. I just, like you, probably think that you know, the geo stuff that Google are doing is just one of the most underrated, underused tools in education that we could do
really
much more of it. We literally could use Earth every day.
Oh, totally. You connect a kid to place, and there's nothing quite like flying somewhere, something and saying, see, that's what I was talking about. And it's right there in front of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Earth every day. That's what I say.
Every day, mate.
Every day. We are about 2 hours and 40 minutes in.
Oh, you're doing well. You're doing well.
So we're doing pretty well. The stream is held up. We're sticking to the time schedule, and everything's going good. I could have just about flown to New Zealand in the time we've been online so far.
You could have. Yeah. Next time.
And I believe you're going to join us at Christchurch and Auckland this year at the summits. So
fingers crossed. Yeah, very much. Looking forward to being parts of the summits again, and bringing some geo craziness around, and maybe bring my makey makeys and bits and pieces out as well. I heard Ant Spranders talking about makey makeys, so yeah, have a good play with those as well.
Good on you. Thanks, mate. Thanks for joining us.
See you later.
I am now going to hand over to my good friend and probably the closest person to me geographically right now, and that is Mr. Wes Warner. Wes, you're in Brisbane, yeah?
That's correct. I'm in Brisbane at the moment.
Okay. Well, you're going to give us a talk called STEM and STEAM.
Thank you very much. Yes, STEM and STEAM. So I will just jump over to share my. I won't go over there yet. Yeah, my name is Wes Warner, as Chris said. I'm located in Brisbane. I teach up on the Sunshine Coast, and my role there is the head of innovation, entrepreneurship, and business, and also looking over the STEM program that we have there at the school. So I'm just going to jump over to our presentation. And so what we've got there is, so I'm also part of the Certified Innovator Group there from 2013 in Sydney, and also an Apple Distinguished Educator. So I want to, sort of look at first with our journey that we had at Pacific Lutheran. Our journey started last year with our STEM program with our Year 9 students, and we based it on a problem-based learning approach, with the subject offered only in semester 1 and then repeated again in semester 2 with a new group of kids. And we started off with these JD robots that you'll see here. Now, these are commercially available robots, and they really, serve our purpose quite well with that introductory unit into our Year 9s. And we, as I said, that we use a problem-based learning approach to it. So the students have to find a real-world problem for their JD robots to solve, and they'll program that. And one of the projects that they were doing was trying to identify the ripe apples. And what we've got there is we've got those red foam balls in the background, and the robots had to pick out those ripe ones there. So there's a real commercial application to what the students were doing. But we wanted a little bit more in our Year 9 program. And so what we looked at a number of different things, and a lot of other skills we're doing as well. And one of those things was looking at drones, and we were looking at that and shied away from that primarily because of CASA, which is the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, with the number of rules and regulations around with flying drones around a school. And given the fact, even with a relatively small cohort of 10 children, that would prove to be quite difficult to actually run a drone program. So we went back and we spoke with the various heads of our science, technology, engineering, and maths departments, and came up with a underwater drone project, and which you see here in operation. So we decided that these underwater drones would become the artifact for the students' learning. So it's not, the be-all, end-all that they actually build the drone itself, but it was the artifact and the learning that took place along the way. So this learning journey and the research and the logbooks that the students produced along the way was actually, what we wanted the kids to do. In the end, they did have this, wonderful little toy at the end that they could, play around with, but it was all the learning that was taking place along the way. So I want to go through, sort of like the build and also the learning that we found throughout this particular course. The students were given the basic components of the underwater robot to start off with there. So they had to measure out the PVC pipes. They were given, some buoyancy there with the pool noodles. And when they came along to doing their testing for neutral buoyancy, they realized that these pool noodles were way too buoyant, and they had to really pare that back quite a fair bit. So effectively, with those lessons on neutral buoyancy was almost like a mini dive course that they had when they were looking at Boyle's law and buoyancy there. So the students put those together, and that was the basic there. And you see here in this particular design consideration that we've got, you'll see that on the corners or on the elbows there, that the elbows have been drilled out as the students realized that the DC motors would not have enough thrust to push the robot down if it was filled with air. So there was a good lesson there on Boyle's law with that in itself. So the students, drilled out those holes. Some of them drilled a few more out there just to get the air to escape a little bit more quickly when they were launching their robots for the very first time. So one of the things, the actual building of the robot itself, which we see there in that previous slide there, that was fairly straightforward. That could easily be done in 15 to 30 minutes. Putting that together. The next part that we looked at was they had to build the circuit board, the control board. So this consisted of 3 switches, and those 3 switches controlled the 3 DC motors that we had there on the motor there. So we carefully considered last year were our 14-year-olds up to the challenge of actually doing soldering. So we consult heavily with our community because we find in STEM-related subjects, our community is our greatest resource. They're the ones that are sort of wanting the students to, come into the workforce with certain skills. And we asked a number of them, and they said definitely soldering is one of those things that the students will need to do, especially if they're doing mock-ups, doing prototypes and demos. They need to do that from an engineering perspective. So we got our students to do a lot of all of the soldering actually along the way. And mistakes occurred along the way, and the students had to learn how to unsolder a particular join and then resolder that along the way. So there were very few students got it away within the first 10 times. There were a lot of resoldering over and over again along the way. So that was a very important skill that we felt that our Year 9s were able to handle. And that was something that took a little bit of persuasion with workplace health and safety. So along with the build, we went back after they had done their control box. We went back to the DC motors, and you'll see the 3 DC motors here. They look like they're actually housed in the old film canisters. If you're old enough to remember that film used to not was not digital. So they fitted in there, and they've got their shaft and they've got their propellers. Within these containers, along with the motors, is a very, very sticky wax. And we worked out very, very quickly that you don't do it on carpet and you need to wear gloves. So that's very important with that there. So there was, the first time that we ran that, there were a lot of kids running around with some very sticky wax on those. So that was part of the waterproofing. And, you know, we did find that with our initial testing later on at the water stage, that some of those waterproofing were not done correctly. So it was back to the drawing board with those and dry out those motors to see if we could salvage those. So one of the skills our science department wanted in their physics in year 11 and 12 is the use of multimeters. So when the students had completed their circuit boards, the students had to learn how to use the multimeter to correctly ensure that their joins were correct. This is where they were able to do a bit of quality control testing on those solder joints. And if they weren't working, if they weren't within the parameters that were set down by the teacher, they had to then, you know, unsolder it and resolder it again and ensure. And you can see it's actually hooked up to one of the motors in the background there on one of the robots itself. So the quality control was, you know, essential when doing these sort of small robots that we've got. So with the initial testing, we're one of the few schools here on the Sunshine Coast that don't have a swimming pool. So, but that didn't stop us from, you know, undertaking an underwater drone project. So we grabbed one of the industrial bins and took it over and put our, you know, our STEM logo all over it, so no one would use it actually as a bin. And we were able to fill that up to about a depth of 1 meter. So that was the depth of 1 meter was pretty good because it was what we wanted to do the testing with their neutral buoyancy. So the students could actually ascertain how much buoyancy they needed to put onto their robot to have it remaining at neutral buoyancy. And you see there that particular robot has no pool noodle on it, so he was just getting a bit of an idea of where it was actually sitting. You'll see Barbie down at the bottom there. She was the rescue case that we used for the students itself. It was also, yeah, with 1 meter deep, and it was about 1.5 meters wide. This industrial bin, it allowed the students to get a bit of an understanding of how to drive their robot. You know, looking at, you know, how much thrust they had to, you know, push down to get the robot down, and then also once they got the Barbie, how much thrust they had to bring up. In our plans, we're actually looking at next year of consulting with some marine engineers with propeller pitch and seeing if we can actually change those propellers, and looking at, you know, the mathematics with the thrust there, and also with the size of the motors that we've got to see whether we can do any sort of particular changes. So here we see, you know, the robot actually in action with the pool noodle on there, so fully neutrally buoyant, being able to maneuver around. You can see the motors running. Now, the robot is completely tethered, and the students have the advantage here in this situation that they can actually see the robot exactly where they are. And we know that in real world situations, that's not going to occur. So in this case here, they're just trying to learn, you know, how their robot runs. And then looking at what sort of attachments they need to then design and build so they could actually pick up Barbie in a quick period of time. Now, one of the things, our plan is to, you know, also in 2019 is to create a larger version of this underwater drone. We're about 5 minutes away from a Lake Kawana, which, you know, has access to salt water. So there's a lot of talk that, you know, there are, you know, marine animals in there such as bull sharks and the like. So we're looking at creating a larger version of this. And the advantage of this underwater drone is because it's tethered using a Cat5 Ethernet cable back to our control box, we're looking at adding, you know, a camera, so then we can truly remotely control our robot, so we know our surroundings. and being tethered, we can actually have that all hooked back through to the control box, and looking at a particular screen. We're also looking at sensors, either temperature sensors down there, and other things to sort of get sort of readings there. The reason why we're looking at utilizing this in a real life case scenario like this is to enable a tool that our STEM students have built and then can lend that to other faculties in the school, such as our science or our environmental studies. So they can actually have a look at the flora and fauna, that's actually what's actually growing under the water in these particular lakes. What's the pollution like? So they can start collecting data, from as of next year with this particular robot. And we feel this is really important for STEM, being able to build something that actually has a real world, solution to a problem. So we're actually, really excited about building this up. And the reason being is that these robots can actually scale up fairly quickly because the circuit board doesn't change. It's just the size of the motor that we've got and the amount of power that we can attach to that. Now, one of the things we're really passionate about is having access to experts, and our community is our biggest treasure that we work with. Here we've got a PhD student that that we work with our Year 10 STEM program when we're doing our prosthetics and bionics units, and looking at creating attachments to prosthetics that will have a real world benefit for those people who have a disability, who may not be able to have a full control over their hands. So, and our PhD student was able to help us with particular, scenarios of where he's actually working in that area. So that access to experts is really, really important for anyone getting a STEM program up and running. And finally, our last sort of thing that we sort of dealt with our STEM program was also with our roller coasters, which was basically to give the skills for our physics students coming into Year 11. So if you've got any particular questions that you want to contact me for more information, my Twitter handle there is @ITeachICT, and so please reach out to me on that one. I'm also on LinkedIn as well. Pretty easy there to find me as well. I hope you've got something out of this, and thank you.
Thank you, Wes. That was fantastic. You are bringing up the next generation of little James Camerons, apparently.
Oh, we hope so. But we found that this artifact. Oh, there's the storm. This artifact was a lot easier to introduce than, say, the flying drones that you see a lot of schools, getting through there. And we just felt that there was just too many hurdles to jump over to get that up and running. And we felt that this was able to give those skill sets for our senior students in an easier and faster way.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I did have the pleasure of hearing James Cameron speak recently when he was in Sydney, and he was talking all about the underwater stuff that he does, and it's interesting to see how you're building those same devices that he was using to do things like, explore the deep, and also filmmaking on the Titanic and that kind of stuff.
And this is such a cheap, relatively cheap way of getting into it for a STEM program. We're probably looking at a class set, looking at around $1,500 to get that up and running.
Yeah, I can't believe you're the only school that doesn't have a swimming pool, though. Come on, get it together.
Well, might jump into that industrial bin.
Well, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks, mate. Enjoy the game tonight.
Will do.
All right. Well, that was pretty awesome. And we are actually a couple of minutes ahead of schedule, which is great. I just want to show a couple of slides, and I'm going to introduce our next guest here. So that was Wes. Take it you guys can see my screen, yeah? Yeah, Victor's nodding. Okay. We've had a whole bunch of people more twittering away there on the EdTechTeam hashtag and the virtual summit hashtag. And encourage as many people as possible, join the conversations, hit the retweet button, share those things around, because we want more and more people to know about what's going on here in the virtual. The EdTech team is, as I said in the beginning of this, we're a group of teachers and ex-teachers, and our mission there is to improve the world's education systems using the best learning principles and technologies available. And we actually do that by working directly with teachers and schools all around the world to help them help make technology education make sense, basically. We see lots of examples of schools that are using technology but aren't particularly, or aren't really sure exactly how to get the best out of it. And that's what we pride ourselves on being able to do, is to work with schools to help them do that. The Flipgrid is still there at flipgrid.com/create2019, and that fits in with our theme for next year. What will you create? Where we'll be really focusing a lot on creativity. I was pleased to see when I hand over to the UK team to take over this in another just over an hour, I guess, that they'll be having a keynote from Amy Burville, and Amy is, of course, well-renowned as a creativity guru and does a lot of really amazing things with creativity. So after the ANZ stream is finished, if you still haven't got enough, head over and follow the UK stream, and that'll be kicked off with Amy. Just want to mention this. I don't imagine there'll be too many people from Australia and New Zealand that will be going to this, but hey, I'll throw it out there just in case you are. EdTechTeam is running a summit at sea from July 27 to August the 3rd next year. And it actually leaves Miami and sails around the Caribbean, and it's a summit on a boat. So, you may be a bit far to travel from down here in Australia and New Zealand, but you never know. There we go. Check it out. It's events.edtechteam.com/summit-c2019 if you want more information on that one. Just a reminder, we've had quite a few people fill in the form to try and win a prize. Some people filled it in more than once. Don't worry, I've gone and deleted the extra names. Please just fill the form in once, just out of fairness to everybody. But you can win a prize, and we've got lots of things to give away. We'll be giving away books and summit tickets and some custom, and some online courses as well. All right, I would like to just introduce Victor. So this is Victor Bradbury. G'day, Vic. You need to unmute. Oh, hang on, you've got no audio. Your audio, you are unmuted, but no audio. I'll let you work on that little problem for a second while I talk about something else. One of the other things that EdTechTeam does is custom PD. As a teacher, I'm sure anyone listening to this broadcast has gone to professional development sessions, and you've gone there and you've kind of left at the end of the day and gone, well, I'm not sure what the point of that was. There was nothing in there that was really relevant to me. We've all done it. At EdTechTeam, we try not to make that happen. We try and make sure that when we do PD with schools, that it's actually something that is things that the school wants, the school needs, and is for the needs of that community. And so we have this custom PD program. If you'd like us to send one of our awesome team members out to one of your schools to work with you, we'll help you develop a program, we'll survey your staff, we'll talk about your needs, and we'll put together a program just for what you need. It's what we do. People know us best for the summits, but we actually probably more of the really important work that we do, we think, is with custom PD and working with schools. And Victor, are you there now?
Yeah. Is it working now?
That's working now. How you doing? Yeah. Good, mate. So Victor Bradbury, you are from Caboolture.
I am.
In Queensland, in Australia. And I thought I'd invite you on because you've been to quite a few of our summits as well, right?
4 as of now.
4. You keep coming back, so they must be okay. But then I guess what I wanted to raise with you is not only have you been to some of our summits, but you then also took us up on that custom PD offer, and you actually brought one of our team, in fact, Kimberly, who kicked us off today, you brought Kimberly up to work directly with your school. So I thought I'd just talk to you about that for a minute.
Yeah, I originally came to actually Edutech, which is where I mix up Edutech and EdTech all the time. And that's where I saw basically all 3 of you present. And then after going to the EdTech summits, and then I had a chat to the principal about how good you guys are, and I keep going, and I need the teachers to come, but could never get uptake on that. Said, well, how about we get someone to come to the school? And he got on board with that, and Kimberly come down, and it's still the favourite PD that we've ever had at school, which is good.
Yeah, you did pass on some of the comments from your staff, and they were very positive. So thank you for that. In terms of, I mean, we probably won't put actual numbers on it here on the broadcast because we can talk about that, directly with people. But your thoughts on cost effectiveness of custom PD? Because I know, if you were to send your entire staff off to do PD, it's probably going to work out more expensive than having us come to you.
I think that was the selling point for our principal when I sort of did the figures for him and said, this is how many people I would like to send, or we could get Kimberly to come up and do. In the end, it was 2 days with us, and do sort of customized based on what people wanted from the first day was really good.
Yeah, fantastic. And she's so great because she's so flexible. Like you can literally pivot. If something comes up halfway through the day, she can literally pivot to sort of meet the needs.
Which is exactly what happened. She was fielding a few questions from some skeptics and literally turned a few people around. And I got some people on board now that I didn't think it ever sort of get onto using the Chromebooks how they should be used.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's great to hear. I really appreciate you sharing that little story with us, and we love working with you guys. So thanks for having us up there. Maybe we'll get us back up.
I'm sure it'll be happening again in the future.
No worries. Good on you. Thanks for joining us, Victor.
Thanks, Chris.
No worries. Thanks, mate. Just a reminder that we are giving away a free summit ticket to someone from watching this stream. Drawing that at the end of this session from Australia and New Zealand. We've got a couple of online courses to give away, and of course we have some books to give away. I don't think we're giving this exact book away, but I want to point it out, Code in Every Class by my good friend Kevin Brookhauser. Kevin teaches at the York School in California. He's written this amazing book called Code in Every Class. And it's all about how you could implement the concepts of coding and actual programming in any class, not just your computer class, but how programming can be used right across the curriculum. It's a great book, really, really worth looking at. So there's that one. And of course, there's this one by Amy Burville. If you're looking at creativity, Amy wrote this incredible book called Intention, Critical Creativity in the Classroom. It is chock full of student-centered activities, lessons, experiences for any classroom. There's so many great activities in this book. I really recommend it. Like if you're into creativity in any way at all, you have to have this book. It's awesome. All of the books that we have here, we are selling through Amazon Australia. So if you go to amazon.com.au, you can just search for the word EdTechTeam. You'll find all of the books we have available. We're still drawing prizes, so don't forget edtech.team/thevirtualprize. Fill in the form there. You'll go in the draw to win all of these cool things at the end of this session. All right, I am going to hand over to Phil, and the third section here, creating teacher leaders. This is the last segment of our the Australia-New Zealand part of the virtual. And Phil, you do win the prize for having the longest title.
Yep.
I see you even dropped the font size on that to make it fit on the page.
Yeah, when I went in there earlier, I was so big, and I thought, oh, yeah, I had to scale it down. That's about 0.4, I think.
All right. Well, Phil Carew, you're from Melbourne, Australia, and you are an outstanding educator. I'm going to hand over to you to talk about using CAD software and entrepreneurial skills to design a product of the future.
Yep, thanks for that. Thanks, Chris. Let's go share the screen. How's that share? All good? Oh.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yes, perfect. It's all good.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Awesome. Good. Great. Thank you. Well, thanks for having me, Chris. It's awesome to be here. I've really enjoyed, coming in and out of the conference so far today. So I think you'll see a few themes throughout my session that I'll address back to, especially Anthony's session with that makey and Scratch as well. But yeah, as Chris said, my name's Phil. I teach at Toorak College in Mount Eliza, and I'm the head of digital technologies and e-learning. So we're a ELC to Year 12 campus, and I work with a range of different students from kinder to Year 12, and train and work with staff as well. I teach VC Media. I do junior technology. So this session will be all about an assessment task that I created for our Year 7 students. So in Australia, Year 7s are usually around 12 years old, and this project is for them. So I think the assessment would really work with, from Year 5 to Year 8. And what's important to, I guess, consider while I'm presenting is that you don't need the CAD software. So you could do this with Scratch. So students could design a game. You could do this with Minecraft. They could create some sort of world. It doesn't have to just be with CAD software. So we'll look at the CAD software first, then we'll go into those entrepreneurial skills for this assessment. So when we were doing creating the assessment, we were looking at the why, of course, very important, and it's something that I like to share with the students. Why I don't really have it in my subject, well, I hope I don't. That why are we doing this? But I think it is important. So besides, building student agency with digital technologies and engagement, I think we do have to look at the Australian curriculum documentations and that digital technologies. You'll just see lots of links throughout this presentation of how the assessment does create to that. Just 2 other resources for you. If you haven't seen the Horizon report, it's a really great report that has some links, especially just leading on from Wes's session about STEM or STEAM learning. And they do in that report, it is global, so it does have that we do need coding and we do need STEAM learning for our student futures. And then we also have a really great resource from Foundation for Young Australians. So really great resource for Australian educators, but even global, you could use some of this data as well. And just for today, that second dot point of that we'll need smart doers who can activate an entrepreneurial mindset because there will be less management. So I think a really big part of this assessment is kind of giving students, the ability to be able to manage themselves, because in the future they will need to have that different type of mindset. So yeah, a great read, a great weekend read. They are hyperlinked, or do a Google, and you'll enjoy those reads over the weekend. So the assessment task is called Product of the Future, and the Product of the Future looks at computer-aided design, 3D printing, the design process, a real focus on social innovation, and then entrepreneurial skills and marketing. So it does cover a lot of different areas in the one assessment. We do have have some links to STEAM learning for our students. So some are a little stronger than others, but we can see that there are those correlations throughout the whole assessment. And I think with like what Wes was saying, STEM and STEAM and those different acronyms, whatever you decide to use, I think it's important for the students to actually know what that is. That they have their teachers and parents, or they might hear it in the news talking about it as well. But I think they need to know and understand what it is all about. So I encourage my students to know STEM futures, STEAM futures, and be engaged by that as well. Always trying to push those areas. So the assessment brief, and like I said at the start, I'm kind of hoping that you'll be able to take this assessment and possibly apply it in your context. For us, we're in the middle of term 4, so you might be able to think of it and use it in term 1 as an assessment task. So I always go to conferences and love those takeaways that you go, oh, I could actually implement that next week. So hopefully you can do that as well. So as you can see there, I won't read through all those points, but we've got the learning intention and the success criteria that we really want our students to develop skills using the CAD software, but then we want them to still design and produce an innovative product. So that's the main real part of this assessment, I guess. This is our very basic project brief. You'll see a lot of resources throughout these slides. I've got my contact details at the end. You'll be able to shoot me an email or contact me via Twitter. I'm happy to share all of these resources. They're all just docs, so you can make a copy and edit for yourself. This is, I guess, the real one. If you're going to take a screenshot, make it be this one. This has the real plan of our 10 weeks. So we do start with step 1, of course, and we have 5 different steps, as you can see. So we start in that concept development stage where students start to develop their concept for what they will produce. So here we focus a lot on social innovation, and we get our students to think about society. I try to get them to think locally, but it can be on a larger scale. I try to think of get them to think of an issue that may exist. So it could be wastage, and then they have to use the technology to create a solution for that. And that's for 2 weeks, it's not a lot of time, but that's where we really focus on those areas. Then in weeks 3 to 6, that's where we introduce SketchUp, and we develop the students skills with that and go through a range of different tutorials. That's where they start to prototype their concept. And then we have step 3, which is the feedback process. So students have to conduct self-assessment, self-feedback, then peer feedback, and then feedback from friends and family as well, that I'll explain shortly. Then we've got the 3D printing process. So students develop some skills in that, and we try to get the students to understand that process. And then we go into the entrepreneurial skills, which is all where we're looking at the actual pitch and presentation. So the students complete a 60-second sales pitch at the end of this to, I guess, promote and market their product. Our marking criteria here, we actually run this as 2 separate assessment tasks. So it's not just one. We have, at the end of week 8, they receive a letter grade mark, and we have an actual rubric. This is just an outline. But we do have, the main first assessment is the product that they produce, and then the second assessment is the sales pitch. So there are 2 separate assessment letter grades for this main task. This here is just a really basic overview. I guess something to take away. This is what we work through. So you can see week 3, in August, we're starting that concept development and working through that process. We focus quite heavily on the design process during this. So especially with Year 7 technology, we look at the design process of how they can apply it in different contexts as well. This is actually one I've always used. It's up in the classroom. It's on our LMS. The students know the language of this design process. It's from Discover Design, and you can see that hyperlink there. But it does start with it define. So the students define the problem, which is, for us, we're looking at social innovation. So we're thinking of, what's happening in society, and, what can we do to try to fix that issue. And then we collect information. That's where students conduct some quite extensive research. Then we brainstorm, we develop that idea. So that's when they start using the CAD software. Then we have feedback, and then we improve our design. So you can see that 6-step process works really, really well. If anything, I guess, if the assessment task doesn't work for you, the design process in any context will work and help. Also works really well for art subjects too. So print a copy of that one. I'm sure a lot of you would have heard of Stonefield School in New Zealand. But I have been looking at quite a bit of their work over the last few years, and their design thinking process is really interesting as well. So we've been moving towards this a little bit more. But if you haven't heard of Stonefields, definitely check them out in New Zealand. But this one I like with our social innovation context, where it has that empathize at the start. So we get our students to start there and then work through prototyping to testing as well. So I think just 2 great visuals for the classroom. It's just really handy, I think, to have them in the room, on the wall, and then you can point and reference them all the time as well. And again, it's just that, like developing the students' language and ability to articulate the design process is really important as well. Then we jump into our concept development. So this is kind of the first start. So once the first point. So the students have completed their research, and then they get started with concept development. So you can see here just some really basic questions. I just put this into a doc and share it with all the students. And then they go through and complete this in like a 2-week period. I do get them to do 2 different products. Sometimes the students don't love that because they're really hooked on their first concept, but it's good to get them to do 2 products, even if it's 2 products linked to the one social issue. Then they can, just develop their ideas that little bit further. This is an example of a student's concept. So you can see over here, they have the annotated sketch. So the students just use drawing here. You can see she started to create her water worker, which is a generator machine to recycle plastics. So they do, we kind of, I guess, students will have different categories. So there might be a bit of wastage or sustainability, and working through those different areas as well, which helps. A lot of students actually made some really strong links to science throughout this assessment task. Students need to annotate, it works really well here because it isn't just that one doc. When in Google Doc they use drawing, they can annotate there, makes it a bit easier to have it all in that one spot. Then from our concept development, these are just some other examples as well. We've got some other annotated sketches here. So this top one, Recover, I just love that title, right? You can see the eco in green. So it's an eco sustainable battery. Yeah, nice design there. This is just, yeah, that basic concept development. So this is where they're starting to produce those ideas. Then from there, we jump straight into the computer-aided design. So this is where the students start to develop their skills. So we use SketchUp, but Tinkercad works just as well. But what I love about SketchUp and Tinkercad is that they are now both browser-based. So, you know, students open up Chrome, jump into SketchUp, jump into Tinkercad, and it works on any device. So we're multi-platform, so we have students with Chromebooks, with Macs, with Windows machines, which you can imagine can be quite tricky at times. But yeah, works really well having SketchUp and Tinkercad as a browser version. Yeah, great thing about both. They do have so many tutorials and support resources online. So if you haven't used them, definitely check them out. I think for, you know, I've used SketchUp with Year 2s for an assessment, which was amazing. You know, I think you sometimes underestimate the students, but at a Year 2 level, they were able to create these amazing 3D shapes and we could print them. But yeah, I think in those senior levels, you know, from like Year 10 up, we want to be looking at some different programs, maybe like Autodesk or some different, more, you know, industry standard CAD software. Here are some examples of our students' work. So this water worker here is Jesse's concept development that you saw earlier. We've got some different products here. This one was, it's an e-piece and it translates for you, which is quite funny because at the time, this is semester 1, the student was developing this idea and I hadn't even heard of the product that actually does that. So it was quite funny when then she kept doing her research and went, oh, it actually exists. That sometimes happens. I think sometimes the concepts are so interesting. I tell the girls they should really copyright them because I could definitely steal their products, which I never would. That wouldn't be very ethical, but a hilarious joke I use every semester when a new batch of Year 7s come through and they think I'm a total dork. But anyway, here are some really strong examples of some CAD products. Then from that process, the girls work through collecting a range of feedback. So as you can see, this is just a really basic pro forma, just a Google Doc sent to all of the students, but they have to discuss here what works and then what's some improvements. Then over here, they've got from Mr. Carew, what's working well and what areas do I think they need to review. And then here we've got feedback from 4 friends and family. So this is where it's just, I think it's nice to, you know, get, you know, mum, dad, brother, sister, you know, uncle, auntie, to be able to look at their work and actually see what they're doing in the classroom. It's quite funny. I always find sometimes the parents are quite honest with their feedback, brutally honest, you know, like, you know, the shape doesn't look very good or, you know, like, really direct, you know, we don't do the feedback sandwich. But yeah, I did actually have a really sweet student a while ago ask if her dog could give feedback. And I was like, no, I don't think it would give you the best feedback, but see how you go. So that is yet another part of the whole process, feedback. Then from there, after they've developed their concept even further and made it even better, we then print their product. So the students get to select a color and go through the printing process. And this is just a group from term 1. So this is earlier in the year. We had a range of different products here that the students produced. From there, we then get into the entrepreneurial skills. So as you can imagine, it's a pretty big assessment task. It's a lot happening, a lot going on. But those entrepreneurial skills really come in at 2 parts of the assessment. So we've got the concept development where we look at students learning about social innovation, and that's where they create products for the specific audience and aim to solve an issue. If you haven't looked at into social innovation, it'd be really good to start using that, especially with design with your students. We use Chris Hart. You've probably heard of Chris Hart before. He does a lot of work with Google. But yeah, definitely look into using him. We have him come out with our to run programs with our Year 7s. Really engaging speaker. So yeah, definitely look into that. And that's a great start. Then from there, they conduct research into local startups. So we even try to contact some past collegians, like past students that have started mini businesses. Then they evaluate how their product could actually, how the student's product could actually be marketed. And the class collaborates as well, which is a big part of those entrepreneurial skills, collaboration and communication. But the main part really to cover those entrepreneurial skills is the sales pitch. So the students all conduct a 60-second sales pitch, and then we have a guest panel. So very similar to Shark Tank, which actually just got axed in Australia, which I'm shattered about because I loved that show. We have a guest panel where we've had the principal before, we've had some staff, but just recently we've tried to get ex-students in, or designers, local designers. So that's been quite effective. I think that just works well because it makes the students, I think they take it maybe a little bit more seriously, and then we're building that confidence for them to be able to, promote themselves, but then also promote their product and promote their work. So this could work for, any, artwork or any product they've produced. And then we've got a self-reflection, and then the students, we actually go through a lot of different public speaking resources, use some different TEDx videos. We get the students to really focus on that, body language, confidence, timing, pace, rhythm, speaking clearly and not too quickly, like I'm sure I've been doing. I do always talk to the students about, I present sometimes and I talk way too quick and forget to stop for a breath. So now is my cue. No, that was funny. Hilarious. Here's an example of some of the student sales pitches. So I do add quite a few constraints, which makes it a little bit easier for the students, so they have those assessment constraints to work within. But these are just some examples of the slide that they get. So they all get one slide, and then they stand up in front of their slide and do their presentation for 60 seconds. So they'll hold their product in their hand and talk about that. So you can see different designs and different products that have been created here. They do have an evaluation which goes through a range of different areas. And I think, really, really important for a task like this, for the students to consider the skills they've developed, how they could, I really like this second point here, how they could employ those skills in the future. So how, in different contexts, could they do that? And then from that evaluation, I've actually just got some feedback, which I just think is, awesome. Year 7 students that have really enjoyed the fact that the assessment was challenging. It was fun to do. They enjoyed it, built on their public speaking skills, and, they just loved the creativity aspect as well. From me, just advice, tips really quickly, last point. 8 to 10 week assessment tasks. So it's 3 hours a week that is in at my school. So we have a double, which is 2 hours, and a single, an hour. So, and that's how we manage this. We get the students to explore future innovations. So we look at Google's self-driving car and all current and future innovations. Human-centered design and social innovation are a really big part of this, and there's some great books on both of those topics. So definitely do a Google on that. I think that last dot point is just really important. You don't necessarily need a 3D printer to successfully run this assessment. And I always, make a real point when I'm presenting about this assessment that it can be anything, or you could even leave it at SketchUp and then the students are using screenshots behind them when they do their sales pitch. So it's a bonus, but definitely not necessary. That's it. Thank you. That's my product of the future Year 7 assessment task.
Thank you, Phil. That's awesome.
Thank you.
You can stop screen sharing and bring yourself back into the picture.
Yes.
And then there you go.
That's great. There we go. Thank you.
What's maybe you can't play favourites, so you don't want to say publicly. But what's some of your favourite things that the kids have done in terms of this project?
Yeah, a really funny one I had. It must have been last year. We've been running this. This is the 4th semester, so 2nd year we've been running it. And last year I had a student run up to me and she was, at the end of year 8, she's like, Mr. Carew, oh my gosh, my product I created in Year 7 technology is an actual product now. And I was going, oh God, I hope that wasn't me. Did I leak her product or what? But it's actually IKEA. I don't know if you've seen them. There's these really great mats, and you can just put your phone on it and it will charge your phone without needing to plug your cord in. That was her product, like well before it was released in IKEA. So I don't know. I feel
she didn't make it and sell it to IKEA. You're talking about someone else made it, right?
Someone else made. Yeah, someone else made it. But she was like, my product is, is in there. Someone else had my same idea. And I was like, oh, missed opportunity there.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. I didn't realize Shark Tank was getting axed on Australian television.
Yes, yeah. Just read that the other day.
They should maybe get the Shark Tank judges and put them on The Bachelor and spice The Bachelor up a bit.
Ooh, I like that. I like the mix of reality TV.
Oh, good on you. Thanks, Phil. That's awesome, mate.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Chris. Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Don't forget to tweet some stuff out for us. And
definitely.
I just checked the Twitter stream. There's a lot of people tweeting a lot of stuff, so that's great. And doing
great
hashtags, the hash EdTechTeam and also the hash the virtual summit. So that's great. And there are quite a lot of people. There's quite a lot of people now that have entered our competition to win some prizes. So don't forget, if you haven't done that yet, I might just zip over here and show you the thing. I'll put this up on the screen so everyone can see it. There you go. So it's edtech.team/the-virtual-prize. If you go over there, there's a Google form. You can fill it out, put your name and contact details, and we're going to draw some prizes in just a little bit. We've got 3 books to give away, 2 online courses, and a summit ticket to wherever it is that you want to go to a summit. So very exciting. Well, it is that time that I'm getting very excited to introduce my friend Jay Atwood. Jay is a data. How would you describe yourself, Jay? A data nerd?
I'm a Sheets geek.
Sheets geek. What Jay Atwood does not know about using Sheets is not worth knowing. So, Jay, you're going to do a talk for us called Data, Drive Your Decisions. Don't drive yourself mad.
Exactly.
Exactly. And I'm looking at the time. You are starting exactly on time if you start now.
Perfect. I will get started then. Thank you, Chris. Let me go over and start to share my screen. This one, you'll see me for a split second. And then,
yep, there you are.
Okay,
gotcha. Yep.
Cool. You should see my slideshow now. And just a little bit about me and who I am and what I do. I am Jay Atwood, and I'm the Director of International Education for EdTechTeam. And like I said, I'm a Sheets geek. I came from the classroom and working in international schools around the world, and now I get to work with international schools and national schools all around in running our summits and our events and trainings and things like that Chris has been talking to you about. So I have a lot of experience with spreadsheets because I've had to use large data sets and stuff like that for my own job over the past few years. And so what I'd like to talk to you guys a little about is this thing about data and what it is that what it can do and how you can make better use of the data that you have available to you. So most people usually have these kinds of reactions when I talk about data, or when I talk about spreadsheets. They freak out. You know, they're seeking help. They need somebody to help save them from this quicksand that they're sinking into. But it doesn't have to be scary, and you don't have to run from it. Actually, one of the things that Google has done very well with the Sheets product is built in a lot of tools to help teach you how to use this stuff, and it'll help you to answer those questions that you need to ask of the data. So with that, when you're basically talking about data and skills that you need when you're looking at data and information, you need to be able to analyze that data, summarize it, and then report on it somehow. So I'm going to kind of try to address those three aspects of this of Sheets in this next couple of minutes here. So here is a link to a starter sheet that has the sample data that we're going to be working with. So if you guys are following along at home, you can join in, or you can create your own copy and kind of play along with me. Otherwise, it'll stay there as well, so you can make your own copies and play with it a little bit later if you'd like. Okay. So when you copy that link and you type that in, so it's virtual starter, so gg.gg/virtual starter, and that should give you a copy of the virtual starter sheet. Now, we're basically going to be working off this one set of information here, and we're looking at some sample information or some sample data from this student group, and I'll just scroll down through it so we can get familiarized with the data itself. So in this case, we've got our first column has our student names, and as you can see, as I scroll down here through them, they repeat. So then it looks like column 2, we've got the years, we've got some groupings, and then we've got 4 different assessments that they've got scores on. And those scores look well, I'm not quite sure what they all are. They look kind of in the everything below 10. It looks like if I just scroll through there, but I can't really see those things very easily without a little bit of help. And we're gonna take a look into that here pretty quickly. So let's get started, and first off, let's just take a look, and we're going to try to figure out where are the students, where are some of those low scores? If we're looking at student information here, and we want to create like a heat map, let's say, of the scores so that the lower scores pop out. I can see there's some ones in here, and I think if I scroll down a little bit later, there's some higher scores, but I don't know where those things are. So in my case, I'm going to use what's called conditional formatting in order to find out that information. So let's just first look at literacy. And if we take a look at literacy, and I come up to the little paint bucket, the little fill tool, and I select conditional formatting, you get this option here for a single color, which colors everything green because the format, cells are not empty, so therefore they're colored green. But the next little button over here, the other side, is color scale. Now when I switch to this, I have the lowest ones are going to be a darker green, but I want to make those redder. So I'm going to do this. So the low scores are redder and the high scores are white as we scroll through them. So you can see kind of where those problem areas are. And we see like here at first, in the first few years here, 2012, 2013, it's very red. So those are all low scores. And we're looking at the high scores, which are 10, which are down here. So I could take that and I could apply that to each of my columns if I wanted to. Okay, another color scale here. Let's do that one as red that way as well. And we have some differences as we see through here. And you can see there's some anomalies to the data too. There's some where there's low scores in high areas, where there's other area where the scores were otherwise high. So those make those things kind of jump out to us. Now with this, you can get a little fancy if you really wanted to. You can change the colors to whatever you want, and you can do it from those colors to from each color to from any color to any color. You can look at the little gradient here. If you want to make it look that ugly, you can, but that doesn't mean you should, right? So our color scale does allow us to do those little heat maps and have those visuals jump out at us. Now, this is raw data. This is raw data, and there's a difference between a spreadsheet and a table. A spreadsheet is what we're working with here, and a spreadsheet is raw data. It's the information. It's every student, every year, and their group, and then their scores for that year, or for that on those 4 different tasks. And it doesn't give us any kind of, I can't tell anything from that really as far as trends, as far as, you know, was a student doing very well in a particular year and now suddenly they're not doing so well? Or was there a group of students that tended to do very well, and why might they have done so well? So in order to do that, we have to create some sort of tables from them. And tables are summaries. So if you think of it like this, that a spreadsheet is raw data and a table is a summary of it, it kind of helps you keep your head around these different concepts. Because that's what we need to do is when we're talking about making data-driven decisions, we have to base those on information on those summaries, not on the individual scores themselves. So we're going to use some other features here built within Sheets to do that. And it's like my favorite thing in the world, which is a pivot table. And right when I said pivot table, people kind of freaked out a little bit. I think some people left. We may have lost a few viewers there, Chris. Sorry about that. But hopefully you stick around, because when I show you some of these things, it's pretty cool and what it can do. So I'm going to select all my data and my whole table here. I'm going to go to the Data tab, Data menu here, and drop down and get Pivot Table. Now, you may not know what pivot tables can do right now, but when I show you, this is going to make a lot of sense. Because this is what a pivot table, how you build it. And you start with your rows. You have down the side, are going to be down the side here. Across the top are going to be columns, and the values are going to be here in the center part once we build it. So if I ask that first question of, okay, well, who are the kids in my class? Well, I can click Add, and I can click Student. And boom, there's a list of all the students in my class. And if I wanted to count those, I wanted to see, well, how many are there total, I can add the student, and it's going to count how many times that student's name appeared in how many assessment scores each of those kids got. And in this case, they all have 7 sets of scores over 7 years. So I can see that information. Let's take a look at these. If I take a look at, let's get rid of pivot, the pivot here value for student. And I'm going to add in one of my test scores. So let's add in literacy. Now, when I drop in the literacy, here it comes up with a bunch of numbers here that I don't know what those really mean because it's a sum. Instead, I want to look at the average. So we've got these various functions that are built right into the pivot table editor. Now when I select average, it gives me the average of each kid for over those 7 years for literacy. Now, when you're dealing with these numbers, we have a very specific level of specificity here. We don't need to get quite that detailed. So we can use the decrease decimal places menu to chop those down to something. Let's just do to one unit there. And average of literacy scores is a kind of a bulky title. Let's just call it literacy. You can type them out in those pivot table headers and areas and change those names quite easily. Before you weren't able to do that. So now I've got my average scores, and now, so if I wanted to take a look at the students and I want to see, I could add that heat map. Right? I could close this out, go back into my my conditional formatting, choose my color scale, and now my scale here has those students that are in trouble. Those pop up as red, looking at their summary scores. Okay. So the pivot table allows us to average out those, or to calculate averages. We could do other things as well. Instead of average, if I wanted to know what is the maximum, well, there's the maximum score that each student got over those years. Okay. So the different summaries can the mathematical formulas that you can choose from are listed. They're probably pretty exhaustive for the things you'll need to do. Sometimes you may need to do some other things, which you can do a little with some other functionality. But we want to look at maybe take a look at the columns, and we want to add in the year. So when I put in year, well, now I've got my years, my years across the top here. Whoop, delete that sheet. I've got my years across the top now. Unfortunately, this or my formatting messed that up a little bit, so I'll change it back. So now I've got my years across the top here, and I've got the raw scores, and then at the far end over here towards the right, I've got their grand total, which in this case is just the summary of those of their it's the maximum, remember, because we chose maximum under our little editor over here on the right. So I changed that back to averages. All of those, that last column now becomes the student's average for those scores. Chop it down again. So this isn't really all that great for us to look at a individual student by years, because these are only individual scores. But instead, what if I chose take a different thing, take out the students, and that grays you out or takes out everything, and I add in the groups. So now I have my groups down the side here, and I've got the averages of each of their scores across the top there, or over each of those years. So I'm going to again drop those down. Let's just put them to 1 like that. And they are now able to take a look at the scores and the averages as they go over the year. You see frogs, there's one group, and one frog was only there for 1 year. And the rest of those were there for all of the years, it looks like. So our pivot table allows us to do those things, and it allows us, we can get some pretty detailed information. Like you can go through, and now if I want this, I want to know which kids are in each of these, or what made up the group called South. Well, you can add in another row and put the student's name, and now I've got the list of all the students under their row, or under their appropriate groups. But I like to double click things and see what happens. So if I do, let's just look at the central group here. If I double click on any of these values, like let's just go over to the grand total. I'm going to double click on it. It's actually creating a new sheet for me called details of all of those values. Now I've got only the central group. I've got all of the years, and I've got their scores, the raw scores and the raw data. So just by double clicking on any value inside these, you are able to get a like a little sub list of those scores in its own sheet. And a little power tip there. So you get the details of what went into make that particular value up. Back on our data, let's have a look at some other things here as we go. I've taken, if we take this and we're going to create a pivot table with this, looking at each of the students. So here, I'm going to do my data. I'm going to go into my pivot. And I'm going to be using a sheet that I actually made already, and it's hidden in your sheet as well. It's called Pivot Table 1. And this is what we can get to, creating something like this, where I have the student. Let's look at the table editor over on the right. I have the student is listed as my rows. In my columns, I've got the years. And then I've also got values of each of their 4 scores. So here's got Autumn, and I got each of her, the 4 assessments, and then the raw scores that go into those. Right? So those are created by adding multiple rows under the values section here. So let's take a look at these. And I'm gonna, the nice thing about pivot tables is that you can destroy them very, very easily, as quickly as you can make them. So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna change this back to something that looks a little ugly. I'm gonna just delete all of these first and then work our way backwards here from it. And let's take out the gears and let's go in and let's add in, for each of the values, I'm gonna add in literacy. So I have all my students, got their literacy scores. And again, it defaults to sum, but I'm going to change it to average for each one. Then I'm going to add in for my values. I'm going to just add in those other columns there. We've got numeracy, change that again to average. We've got critical thinking, change that to average. And we've got ethical understanding, change those again to average. Let's just double click, make those all the same, or all a good width here. And we're going to drop those numbers down again. Okay, so there I got their scores over each of those, the average score for literacy over all the years. So this is their total score over all the 7 years of data that we've got created there. So again, you can change the, let's see. Of course, numeracy, we'll just do it that way, and do it here. Thinking and ethical understanding. You can see everything in a little bit more clearly now and see their average scores over all of those times. So again, we're letting the pivot table do the work in creating all of that information for us. Now, some of you are thinking, well, I don't know how to do all this. It's going to be a little bit too hard to do it. And there is a learning curve to this, I guarantee. But the nice thing that Google has done is that they've built in the Explore tool. And in Sheets, the Explore tool does some fascinating things. And if you just click on it, you open it up, and you've selected the data, it starts to give you, it gives you these cards. And it tells you some things on here that you don't get when you look at the same type of the Explore tool in other areas. And what I like to do it with it is, let's go back here to this pivot table. Let's go here, and actually we'll try it on this one. We'll see. So if I want to do when you have this little space here to ask questions of your data, it gives you these ones right here. So it gives you these options of things you can ask and questions that you can ask, and have the Sheets application really solve it for you. So if I take a look and I do what is the most frequent group, if I just do these ones that they have suggested the most frequent group, well, that's the West group, right? And because there's 23 within there. And the thing that's cool about it is that it has, see this formula, you click on this little link here, and there is the very, very complicated formula that calculates that answer. On my other sheet here, I'm going to go back to this one. I'm going to try to just do this really quick, is get rid of this because I destroyed something that I kind of really needed. If I do my values, it's literacy, and I do my students up here at the top. Students. Okay. And I'm going to take out the columns. So you're able to put in, let's do literacy, let's do numeracy, critical thinking, and ethical understanding. And if I change it to these averages really quick, for like the third time, hit it correctly. You're able to take a look at these, and you're able to ask the questions like some questions like, let's close this out, go back to our Explore. undo. Go back to our Explore tool. And you could say, if I scroll up to the top here, say literacy. So the top 3 students, you see it actually pop up there, students in literacy. And here you go. They're the top 3 students with a literacy score. Because you could see if I added in the group, so let's look at another question. The top group in numeracy. And as the Midwest has the top scores in that. And they'll come up with these formulas. And the cool thing here is it gives you other related questions. And I was playing with this a little bit earlier, and it went even into the detail of correlations. You say, what's the correlation between group and literacy scores? Or some of these other different values that you have. So you can ask it kind of real world questions or in almost natural language using the headers, the headers that are here, for example, in order to ask it questions based on that. So when it gives you these different options and the different suggested questions, it'll give you the option as well to add charts. So let's say I wanted to do a chart. Here's a quick chart that it created for me. And if I want to take that one, I can take that one and I can insert my chart. And now when it comes time to report, I take my chart. And what's cool is that they added in the feature just recently. If I could take that and I can copy it, use my Command-C on my keyboard, and I go back to my presentation, I go down here to this sheet and I paste it. Now I get this option to paste a linked spreadsheet or to paste the data linked or unlinked. Now when I paste it linked, anytime I make a change in my spreadsheet, it'll change and update this right here as well. So that's the way, that last little step there about reporting, that's how you keep everything kind of wrapped up together and on top of things if you have to report any of these types of data results. And I think I hear Chris in the background, and I think my time is pretty much up.
Did you hear my virtual toe tapping, did you?
Yeah.
That was great. Thank you, Jay. I do love spreadsheets, and I know you do too, and they're so powerful. I bumped into someone in a workshop the other day that was saying, oh, yeah, sheets are okay, but like, you know, if only they could do everything Excel can do.
Yes, wow. Send that person to me. I'll straighten them out.
Yeah, it's, yeah, they soon realized that was the case. They are incredibly powerful.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thanks so much for that.
No problem.
I did have a couple of people asking in the Twitter, you know, is this being recorded? Because I want to go back and revisit the stuff that Jay's doing. Yeah. It's moving very quickly, but I do want to know it. So yes, all these sessions are being recorded, so that's fantastic. I am going to hand over to our very final speaker for this part of the virtual, and that is Mr. Rich Lambert. Rich, I'll let you introduce yourself. You are a principal these days, I believe, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I'll let you tell the full story, and you're going to tell us all about top tips for leading change. You're going to take us up to 7:50. If you felt like finishing a minute or two early, that's okay, because we've got a couple of things to do to wrap it up at the end, so don't feel like you got to go if you don't need to.
Okay.
Over to you, sir.
No worries. Thanks, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yep, all good.
Yep. Do you want me to, do you control my screen or?
You share your screen and I'll make sure it stays as the dominant one.
All right, no worries. Okay, here we go.
All good.
All good?
Yep.
All right, well, welcome everyone. And the beauty of 21st century learning, I've just been out to dinner with my family, so it's something, then duck into work and do a bit of a presentation. It's quite surreal, but it's good to be with you all. And I've just heard Jay's amazing, incredible stuff. I'm going to go back and watch that myself again. So I am a principal of Antonio Park here in Melbourne in the eastern suburbs, and I've had this same presentation heading for about more than 5 years, I think, and I've never done the same presentation twice, because it's really just, as I learn stuff, I change the slides around and put in what I've learned. And I learn so much every year about this. I don't think it's something you ever stop talking about or learning about. So something that I always like to do is start really, really positive and start with a really positive slide, and that's it. So not so positive, but probably not a surprising statistic. for you guys out there. I'm not sure what it's like in your part of the world, but certainly change initiatives in education tend to struggle. And when you look at the research, it's a pretty consistent figure. We're looking at about 70% of change initiatives that fail, basically, that don't, and when we say fail, it's about that sustained change. So when the person that's led it has moved on, the change sustains, and that's the big challenge in education as well, obviously. So I want to look at why that's the case, because it is something really difficult and something that we, I find a lot of people that I guess are into technology and come along to the summits and things like that, obviously are change leaders in their schools. So what is going on? And something that I've noticed is this fantastic unspoken theory of action. And the problem with it is that it's never worked, and I don't think ever will. So, but this is a theory of action that's been in place all over the world for many, many years. When I say theory of action, we'll talk about theories of action a bit more in a minute. So that's a term we'll come back to. But this is an example of a theory of action, and this is how I started out on my leadership journey, which is pretty much this. So you think, I've found this great thing, I'm going to share it. I'm going to tell people about it. So I'm going to hold a staff PD. I might do a techie brekkie or a PD at school. People are going to come along. I share this new thing. That's going to result in them seeing it and having a new understanding. And then from there, once they see it, they're going to love it. And that's going to change what they do for sure, because it changed what I did once I knew about it. So their behavior is going to change, and then, yeah, you've got your change. That's what's going to happen. Unfortunately, as we know, humans just don't work like that. And unfortunately, that model of change is pretty unsuccessful. So we want to look at what's actually going on and what might be more successful for you guys in your schools, and for leaders and for teachers that are wanting to become leaders, some really important points. And the first one, as I whip through my top sort of 5 or 6, it's not about what you're bringing in. And that's what that model mistakes. It sort of thinks, well, here's this great new thing. People are going to see this and absolutely love it and do it themselves. But it's not the what that's important. And we know that from countless bits of experience and research. It's all about how you implement change, not what you're bringing in. You can bring in a terrible thing and you do it really well, and the change succeeds, or you could have the best idea or the best product in the history of the world, and if you stuff up the implementation, then it's just not going to take. It doesn't matter how good it is. So focusing on the what isn't the thing. We've got to look at the how. So we looking at this thing called change, and people assume that everybody hates change, and I don't think that's quite accurate. If everyone hated change, they probably wouldn't go on holidays. People actually enjoy a bit of a change from time to time. What they don't like is uncertainty. When you go on a holiday, you know where you're going, you booked your hotel, etc., etc. It's a change. It's a great experience. When we experience change in our work life or in our life where we don't know what the end point is and we're uncertain about it, then it's not going to be a positive thing. So what you need to do as a leader is be sure that you know what the destination is, and that's what you're selling. So if you can paint a really clear picture of that destination, then you're selling, I guess, an opportunity, a solution, an answer to a problem, and that's the vision that you're selling to people. And then you reverse, it's also called reverse design, where you plan back from there. And you make clear to everybody the steps that we're going to take to reach that destination. And then what you've done is taken the uncertainty out of the change, which is the aim of the game. So one trap we all fall into is using buzzwords. 21st century learning's a good one. Global citizens, all that sort of stuff. It actually doesn't mean anything to people that aren't already sort of inclined in this way of thinking. So you need to be really clear and specific. And if, as that first quote I like, I'd remind that of every day in my job leading a school, is if I can't say it clearly, I don't understand it myself. And as a leader, I often fell into that trap, just having a general idea of what I want to do, but not being able to articulate it. If I can't specifically say it, then I don't really know what I want, and that's a dangerous place to be, and certainly for staff to try and understand what you're talking about. And so what looks like resistance can actually just be a lack of clarity quite often. So that's a good one to remember, because people, what sometimes look like blockers can actually just be people that don't quite understand what you're wanting or how it's done. So this is a really example of a tool that's really simple. It's called a contrast frame, and you just put a title up. I put teaching and learning pedagogy, or it could be digital tools, or it could be digital technologies curriculum, or anything you wanted there. And you're talking about what is. You brainstorm with your staff or your team, what is the actual situation at the moment, and then do a bit of a visioning session. What should be, or what could be. I like what should be because it's sort of got that moral imperative to it. It's got we've got a moral obligation to prepare our kids for the future. So we add that should instead of could, and then we build from there. Okay, next tip is ironic for this presentation, I know, but it is stop talking about change. That's a word you don't need to use. What we're really talking about is improvement, and there's a lot of power in language. People are the word change has a lot of connotations that are negative. We're actually talking about improvement, and it's continuous improvement. We never reach an end point with it. As educators, we're always improving, and hopefully our schools are always improving, and that's what I talk to staff about, that continuous cycle of improvement. So it's not, staff get a bit flat about new things. Oh, here we go, here's another new thing. And I like to say it's not another new thing. We're actually getting better at the thing. There's only one thing, and that's preparing kids for the world. And we're getting better and better at that. And so talking about improvement rather than change, and that helps to measure out whether the change is necessary as well. If it doesn't improve the end game, if it doesn't improve what you're doing as a school or as a team, then it's not worth doing. So talking about improvement rather than change. This is huge, and this is all over the world, that when people come in to change a school, particularly principals, they often try and do it all too quickly. And someone used a phrase the other day that I hadn't heard of before. Hence the elephant in the picture. They said you can only eat an elephant one bite at a time. So I'm not sure we want to eat elephants, but anyway, that's why we've got a microscope on an elephant. But we're not talking about revolutions. Revolutions don't often work in schools. We've got to do really narrow focus, do less but better. So be really specific with what you want to achieve and measure it. And when you feel like it's achieved and sustained and embedded, then you move on. But you don't try and change too much at once. It's a classic trap to fall into. Now, we've all seen this, and you all know, start with why and all the rest of it. You've watched Simon's TED Talk, and it's well established, and it's a good point, because starting with why you're doing the change, it provides purpose and it drives motivation, and you want that motivated staff that become passionate about and start to own that idea for themselves. And that's really important, because some people, as I said, we go back to the original theory of action. It assumes that if you build competence and understanding, then people will change, but it's not. It's about building belief and building the passion and ownership of the change. But there's a why that gets missed, and that's what I want to talk to you guys about, because you know about starting with why. This is the why that we missed, and what I say is start with why are things like they are. That's the point you got to start with. There's always reasons behind the situation that you've walked into, or why things are like they are at your school. And that's a really important investigation to make, because that iceberg, it's a classic image, and you know, it gets used a lot. But if you think about the top of the iceberg, that's what you see. That's people's actions. That's the way things are done at your school at the moment. But what's hiding beneath that is a massive amount of people's beliefs, people's values, and there's that word again, theories of action. In other words, people do things for a reason. It might be subconscious. They might not even be aware of it. But what they're doing every day comes from a belief around that that's effective, or that that's the best way that they know how to do it. And if you don't uncover why people are thinking that, then you're not going to be able to shift that top of the iceberg. And that's why change often doesn't get sustained, because leaders address what they can see, that is people's actions, but their underlying beliefs and values aren't aligned to the change. And so if you can spend some time aligning your beliefs and values and your theories of action with the people around you, you actually find that you're not all that different from the people that might seem like they don't want to change. It's just there might be a few little differences in how what they believe works and what you believe works, and it can actually be a pretty little thing that you can align, and it can lead to much more effective change, and also more collaborative and positive change, and more positive culture around your staff, because they're actually genuinely see the point of what you're trying to achieve. And you know, you're not always right, and that's a big thing to remember too. I heard a leader speak just a couple of days ago that said he asked his staff for 85% commitment and agreement with the change. 85%. He said 85% is better than 100%. And why is that? Because I'm always wrong about something. So if they're 85% on board and I'm open to learning myself, someone's got to say, hey, I reckon actually doing it this way might be a bit better, or this bit you've got a bit wrong. And quite possibly they're right. I'm open to changing as well, and we can get on with it. So I love that. 85% is better than 100%. So if you're shooting for 85% of alignment with your staff, you're in a good place. And that leads to just an understanding as well of where your staff are at with what you're trying to do. Because some of them will genuinely want to do it, but they don't have the skill. So that high will, low skill. Some have the skill and the knowledge, but they don't want to do it. They don't believe in it. That low will and high skill. And some will have both. So that's Anthony Muhammad, if you want to check that out, he talks about that, knowing where your staff sit on that quadrant, and that helps you to target their needs a bit better. If they're low will, then you need to go in with that underlying, sort of find out what they really believe, what they value, why they're not connecting with what you're talking about. If they're low skill, then they need help. They need some extra PD and some skill sessions perhaps. Once you've done that, you need to set the ground to be fertile for change. And these are technical changes around your school or around your team. They're called practice architectures in some of the literature, and they're really, really important. So there's systems and structures you set up that make the ground fertile for the improvement you want to see. Because sometimes people want to do what you're telling them. They just don't have time, or it's physically impossible for them. So, you know, time's a big one. I always look at timetables, releasing staff, giving them time to do what they need to do if I'm asking them to change. Clear expectations, you know, again, being able to articulate what you want, that professional development, how you select your teams, how you select your team leaders if you're a principal, your meeting schedules, those sorts of things. Reliable infrastructure is really important too. If you don't have that right, people get really frustrated. And finally, this is a really powerful one that I found. So we know about, well, you might not know about, but this chart's a good one. It's around diffusion of change. And, you know, your innovators and your early adopters. What people sometimes miss in this theory is that the first half of that chart is people that you can actually influence. The second half, the people you're probably not going to influence. Those people are influenced by the people in front of them. So that late majority only change when the early majority have already changed and had some success. This change is a social process. So you're not actually going to impact them directly. So if you're waiting for them to get on board before you feel happy with yourself, then don't, because they're not going to change until it's other staff that are going to influence them. But something Jenny McGeera actually taught me that's really powerful was don't start at your innovators and early adopters, because they're fine. They're gonna go early anyway. Find your cultural leaders. They're going to be in the middle of the pack there somewhere, and target them. If they get on board, that is the most powerful thing for the change, the success of the change that is possible. And it's usually one or two, maybe three staff that are the cultural leaders. They might not have a badge, they might have an actual leader by title, but they're the people that other people go to, people that people go to when they've got a problem, or you know, people that they respect the opinion of. So if they get on board, your job's 80% done. So we often target those early adopters. Think about the cultural leaders at your school and who you might have a go at targeting. And finally, this is a phrase I need to keep in mind, because I'm something that wants everything to change yesterday, because I got a really clear idea in my head where I want the school to be. But to get something done fast, you have to go slow. And that's a mantra for me. Change, Simon Breakspear quote, sorry I haven't got his name on there, I need to put that on, but change happens at the speed of learning. Literally, it happens at the speed of learning. We're talking about adults learning new things, and it can't move any faster than that. And if you try and force it, it's all going to fall over. So that's all about change, or improvement, I should say. And good luck with it all.
Good on you. Thanks, Rich. Much appreciated. We really appreciate having your perspective as a principal and as obviously someone in a leadership position. It's pretty awesome.
No worries. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks. I am going to invite into the Hangout now Mr. Andrew Caffrey. Andrew, g'day.
Good morning, Chris, and good evening to everyone over there in Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah.
My name's Andy Caffrey, and I'm here in Denmark, getting ready for the next leg of the virtual. So joining us straight after you guys finish. If you want to just refresh the Watch Now page, you'll be able to pick up our European feed as we come live from Denmark, where I've been for the Innovator Academy. And we got sessions starting, as Chris mentioned earlier. Amy Burville's up first with Crushing It With Creativity, our European keynote. And then following on from that, we've got sessions looking at digital coaching, looking at using video to show student understanding. Lindsay Westner's joining me here in person, looking at Create the Possibility, cultivating a growth mindset in your classroom in G Suite. We're looking at virtual reality tours with Tour Creator, going global and creating more free time, looking at teacher workload and how that can be benefited. So lots more sessions coming up. There's certainly no way that you guys need to go to bed yet. There's plenty of time left to stay with us. So as soon as the ANZ feeds finish, feel free to refresh that Watch Now page, and then you can come and join us for our European feed.
Fantastic. And Andy, I should point out that you are the UK director for EdTechTeam, so you look after the UK, which essentially encompasses Europe and bits of Africa and all sorts of other places as well.
It certainly does, Chris. Yes, so I look after this whole region, but I'm out in Denmark at the moment, where we've just finished the European Innovator Academy. So we're also going to have some innovators dropping by during our feed this morning.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us. I will make sure everyone hands off over to you guys, because we've been going for 4 hours. Can you believe it? And we're going to hand over to you for another 4 hours, and then you're going to eventually hand off to the US at some point, and we'll wrap this whole thing up.
We're keeping this a global learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us, mate. I'll let you go because I know you've got to run around in the background and fix a whole lot of things with the stream. I'm going to give away some prizes, and we will wrap it up and hand it over to you at the top of the hour.
Great. Thanks, Chris. See you soon.
Thanks, mate. Bye.
Bye.
Well, everyone, thank you for joining us here on the virtual. The Australia-New Zealand part of this virtual summit is drawing to a close. I've got some prizes to give out, so let me present this up here. So you should be able to see my screen now. We've had a bunch of people tweeting on the EdTechTeam and the virtual summit hashtags. Particularly want to give a shout out to, there was a couple of people that were sort of doing a whole bunch of stuff there, and it was, who was doing a whole bunch of twittering? Sharon Cooper was tweeting. We had Deb Loves Libraries, it's Deb Hogg based in Sydney here. She's been going crazy with the Twitter, and Michael Vorster's always been twittering, and a whole bunch of other people as well. But thank you for everyone who's been keeping the Twitter stream happening. I will change to that slide. Just a reminder again, we are EdTechTeam. We're all about improving the world's education systems with the best learning principles and technologies available, and hopefully making learning about using tech in your classrooms a whole lot of fun and meaningful. I haven't even had a chance to look at the Flipgrid yet because I've been so busy juggling the other stuff, but I'm hoping to go over there soon and find a whole bunch of really cool things in the Flipgrid. That's flipgrid.com/create2019, where you can go over and leave some video comments there on some of the stuff you've managed to get out of this section of the virtual. So I'm looking forward to checking that out. If you haven't done it yet, pop over there and do it, flipgrid.com/create2019. Last chance dance, if anyone wants to fill in the form to win some prizes, it is, you have about 30 seconds to do so. Please don't do it a second time. I've been looking at the names of some people who have been trying to increase their odds. I saw it, don't worry, and I fixed that up. EdTechTeam.online, we do a whole bunch of online courses. It's a great option, really like top quality courses in all sorts of things. If you head over there to EdTechTeam.online, you can learn more about it, browse through all the courses, and we have both cohort courses which start and finish as a group with an instructor, and we also have some self-paced courses as well that you can do at your own pace. We are giving away a free summit ticket. We are giving away some books. So this is probably not one of the ones I'm giving out, but all of that stuff that Steve Smith talked about using Google Earth and maps and geo tools in order to, you see my screen? Yeah, I think you see my screen. There's a book about that some of our contractors in the US have written. It's available on Amazon. It's called Bring the World to Your Classroom. It is fantastic. Highly recommend it. Reminder again about the prize. Reminder again about the Flipgrid. Okay, let's draw some prizes. So this is what we're giving away. We're giving away a copy of the Hyperdoc Handbook. It's a fantastic book by Lisa Highfill, Kelly Hilton, and Sarah Landis. I believe Lisa Highfill will be our guest speaker at the Christchurch and Auckland Summits. So that's pretty exciting. We're giving away a copy of 40 Ways to Inject Creativity into Your Classroom with Adobe Spark. That's by Ben Forter and Monica Burns. A copy of the How to Sketch Note, Step-by-Step Guide for Teachers and Students by, of course, Sylvia Duckworth. We'll give out 2 online courses. That's the self-paced online courses, and 1 summit ticket. Okay, let me just do some things in the background here. All right, there's our list of people, and there's someone else who decided they're going to have a second go at putting their name in the draw. Doesn't look like that, guys. Sorry, taking your name out. If you're in there once, don't go in a second time. Just to be fair to everyone, right? Okay, so pop all those names in there, and let me go and share this part of my screen. How do I do this? I do that and say share my screen, like that. And maybe I'm hoping that screen goes yellow and you're all seeing that screen. Is it not going yellow? That's okay. That's all right. I can see the names. I'm going to draw the names out. So the first prize, which is the Hyperdoc Handbook, is going to go to it's going to go to Bonnie Cooper. So Bonnie Cooper wins Hyperdoc Handbook. That's great. I'll make a note of that, and we'll get that out to you soon, Bonnie. We'll send that out to you in the mail. Second prize is the 40 Ways to Inject Creativity. It's going to Michaela Anderson. Congratulations, Michaela. Well done. Next prize goes to, it's the Sylvia Duckworth book on sketchnoting. It goes to Susie Rip. Congratulations, Susie. We'll send that out to you in the mail shortly. EdTechTeam online course of your choice going to Ryan Harwood. Congratulations, Ryan. Well done. We'll get that out to you. We'll be in touch. We've got your details, and we'll be in touch soon and let you know how we can get that to you. The second one goes to Richard Bayliss, another online course from EdTechTeam University. Thank you. And the big prize, a ticket to an EdTechTeam summit of your choice, is going to go to Deanne Moller. So thanks, Deanne. And I saw you were you were contributing earlier in the chats and stuff. So I'm really glad that you got to win that. So that about wraps us up, ladies and gentlemen. I think that's us. The Australia and New Zealand part of this is done, and I'm actually pretty impressed that we've all managed to keep to time. That was my biggest fear, that we would run over on everything. We haven't done it at all. We've actually been pretty good. So we're going to hand off to Andy over there in Denmark, who's going to pick up the European feed and keep running with this for the next 4 hours. You can look forward to a keynote coming up shortly from the always amazing Amy Burville. She's talking about critical creativity. Her talk is called Crushing It with Creativity. The description says, creativity is what makes us human, but far from being an elusive abstract concept or reserved solely for the artistically talented, it's something can be understood, practiced, and cultivated. So I can't wait to hear Amy talk about that. She was our guest speaker at the Canberra Summit this year, and people absolutely loved what she had to say and what she did down there. So over to Europe, over to Andy. Hope you guys had fun. Thanks for joining us on the virtual ANZ. We'll see you next year. We'll see you at a summit in the meantime. See you later, guys. Bye.